Hello and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech news in Asia. Today is Monday, the 8th of June, 2026. Let's get right to it. Our top news story for today is Nvidia part of China's robot boom, or frankly, part of any robot boom? We'll get to that. We've got another great group of guests today. Initially, we're going to have Wei-Chuan, co-founder at KitaLulus. Will join us to talk about how AI-powered hiring platforms are helping employers in Indonesia find better talent. Another person in the HR tech space using AI. Cannot wait to have this conversation while widening access to jobs, skills, and career mobility. Following that, we welcome Ganesh, Kumar, Ramachandran, head of engineering and product at Pando, to discuss how AI-powered logistics platforms are helping enterprises turn supply chains from reactive operations into autonomous decision systems. Very interesting stuff there as well. Next, we will talk to Olivier, co-founder at Auptimate, to cover how automated SPV and syndicate infrastructure helps founders, angels, and venture investors execute startup investments faster, cheaper, and with less operational complexity. If you know anybody who's tried to start up a fund, you know how important this is and just how non-trivial it is to do all this stuff. And then Ankit, Upadhyay, founder and general partner at A2D Ventures, will talk about how angel investing platforms are changing early stage capital access for Southeast Asian startups. And later in the program, we'll be joined by Isabella Suarez, head of engagement for Southeast Asia at TransitionZero, to explore how open energy modeling software helps governments, grid operators, and investors make faster, more transparent, clean energy decisions. And in a world where AI data centers are trying to go up everywhere, that is very important for sure. And finally, Mohammed Furqan Karim Kidwai, co-founder and CEO at Plouton AI, will join us to talk about how AI automation will reshape finance operations, controls, and the role of finance teams. I started my career at Morgan Stanley in the controllers department. I cannot wait to have this conversation with him. And before we get to all of our guests and some news, let's hear from our presenting sponsor, Twilio. Twilio is the secure and scalable platform to build amazing customer engagement without the complexity, with the AI-driven workflows you need to connect. They are trusted by over 300,000 businesses. It is the platform that simply makes more possible. Visit twilio.com to start building today. Okay, let's get to some news. China's robot supply chain, and we've spoken about this here a lot actually, is ready. It's definitely ready. And Nvidia wants in at some level. So China's humanoid robot push has moved to its industrial output phase. It's no longer in the can we build this stuff phase. It's definitely in the industrial output phase. The country as a whole now has the manufacturing base, the supplier network, the government backing, which we've discussed, and aggressive robotics companies needed to build humanoid robots at scale, for better or for worse, I might add. The most important fact here is that China reportedly accounted for about 85% of global humanoid robot output in 2025. And Unitree is one of the clearest examples. We've spoken about Unitree, I think, who's working with Haneda Airport to put some of their robots in a test phase. They're to work along with humans, by the way, and to see like where they fit in. I think this stuff is really interesting. Unitree, as I said, is one of the clearest examples of this. It has made humanoids visually compelling, relatively affordable. I looked at it and I thought, hey, maybe Undercover Media should buy one of these things and test them. But let's see where that goes. And easy to understand as a symbol of China's hardware strength. I mean, China definitely is leading here for sure. The harder part, though, frankly, is demand. Does anybody want these things? And if they do, where do they want them? Many humanoid robots still work better in demos, excuse me. I was thinking Domino's. Maybe I'm just hungry for pizza. In real workplaces. They remain, even though individually to buy them, they're not that expensive. The maintenance, the upkeep, the software, all that stuff could make them actually slightly more expensive, which is probably why Undercover Media will not buy one. They're limited to specific tasks for now, although I do think that's going to get a lot better. They're dependent on very structured environments. So in a way, right, they're learning it in real time. And we spoke to somebody again a few weeks ago in Singapore about how these robots actually learn. But for now, they're best in a structured environment. And in some ways, they're hard to justify against cheaper automation. There are ways to do some of the things that robots can do today It may just be cheaper if you just automate them in a way that doesn't require a humanoid robot. But I do believe these things are going to continue to get tested. China's probably proving here that humanoids can be manufactured, but the industry has not yet proven that enough customers know what to do with them. But again, and I say this a lot in the context of AI, and I do think that there's a combination of a robotic story here and an AI story here. We can say all we want about like whether AI is effective, whether it makes people more efficient, whether it's actually cost effective or not. But we are so deep into the early innings of this, which means like it's very, very early. When I say deep into the early innings, I don't mean we're in the third inning. I mean we're in like the first batter or the second batter or the first inning here. We don't have enough data points. The sample size is too small. We don't know what's going to happen. But let's talk about this. Nvidia is also moving with Unitree and Singapore-based Sharpa, and that's going to turn this into a much bigger story. Nvidia's Isaac GROOT reference humanoid robot combines a Unitree robot body, Sharpa's dexterous hands. This is one of the things I always look at when I look at the robots is, what do the hands look like? I don't know. I've been fascinated with sort of hand movements and hand dexterity ever since I had my daughter 20 something years ago. Just like the hand is so complex and so unique. It's one of the things that I look at right away. And NVIDIA's also embedding their own computer and their own software here. So just think about the combination of those three things together. NVIDIA is trying to create a common development platform for humanoid robotics, research, all the way out to deployment. You have to think about this in the same way that Microsoft Surface builds these sort of reference PCs, and they kind of expect the entire industry, along with the software, along with the hardware that they're building, as a reference model. They want people to understand, here's not the limit of what we think is possible, and here's the base of what we think is possible. And now we expect you to build on top of that, to build better versions of our reference model. We're going to sell ours too. Microsoft does this with the Surface line, but it doesn't stop Dell or HP or any other PC manufacturer from selling models that frankly look very similar in design. Microsoft's not mad about this. They're happy about it because they want to make sure that their devices are in fact the reference device here, excuse me. Now, NVIDIA's robotics plan is at some level to make itself the default platform for physical AI even before the market is actually fully developed. And in a way, this is kind of what Microsoft did 50 years ago when they said, we want to have a PC in every home, a PC on every desk. People laughed at them. But at the end of the day, that's what happened. It was not just at work, but at home. Everybody had some sort of computing device at home, and now everybody carries one in their pocket. It's a slightly different story. But getting there early in this case actually could be very good for NVIDIA. And remember, a few months ago, we had a very long segment about NVIDIA wants to create a factory for artificial intelligence. And this is kind of the end point of that factory, right? They want to create the chips. They want to have CUDA still be important. They want to create the data centers that run it. They want to even have some model stuff of their own. And then they want to embed this stuff in partnership with Unitree, with Sharpa, and put their chips and their software inside of these humanoid robots. Again, it doesn't need to own the body itself. That's why they're partnering with Unitree and with Sharpa. But it wants to own the compute layer and the entire deployment layer as well, that every robot maker is going to build on top of. And this is important, right? Because in the same way that there was this Wintel partnership, Windows and Intel, those two teams benefited for 3 or 4 decades from building the reference devices and the reference chips into the ecosystem that needed personal computers. And NVIDIA is trying to turn robotics into the same type of programmable ecosystem where humanoids can be trained in simulation, improved in real time at some level with real-time data and real-world data, and deployed across many different hardware partners. The bet is very simple, but in a way very ambitious. Again, the bet that Microsoft made was super simple as well. We just want to have a PC on every desk, a PC in every house, a PC on every desk at work. This is a very simple, but very ambitious, particularly in a world where PCs were not everywhere, just like today. NVIDIA is making a very similar bet, saying that humanoid robots don't exist everywhere today, but their bet is like very simple but ambitious. As robots move into useful work, and this is, again, what's been getting tested at Haneda, right? They're not just going to stand around and like look at things and scan barcodes and stuff. My guess is that at Haneda Airport, they're going to be lifting suitcases. They're going to be moving stuff around. They're going to be doing things that humans do in conjunction with humans. They're going to learn. They're going to get better. And as the robots do that useful work, the value of those robots shifts to making the machine learn, adapt, and operate safely in the physical world. And I think that's actually going to be super, super important. And again, you can't think about this as a one-off. You have to think about this in the context of what types of other sort of technological implementations have happened over time. And I think the PC is the perfect avatar for this. As I said before, what Microsoft wanted to do was very, very simple and very ambitious. And to be fair, over a 30 or 40-year period of time, the last 10 years have been different because the way the PC market has moved and the way it has matured and the way it's become insanely global with tons of manufacturers was just different today. But from 1970 something until 2015 or something, that market pretty much operated the same. Definitely pre-OpenAI, definitely pre-AI. We'll see what happens in the future, but I think it's a good reference point for what's going to happen in the robotic space. Now, we're on record a little bit as saying like we didn't think that humanoid robots were going to be 100% necessary. I'll let the market decide that, but what I will say is this: robotics is going to go mainstream. I can't tell you what the format's going to be. I can't tell you what the form feature is going to be. I can't tell you that it's going to look like a humanoid, but I can tell you for sure that robots are going to do way more work in the future than they're doing today. That I know for sure. And this is the bet that Nvidia is making, and they want to work with some of these Chinese manufacturers. That's why this idea is Nvidia really part of China's robot boom is the thing we want to talk about, because China is definitely the manufacturing base for all of this stuff. It's always going to be. They're just better at that, and they're set up for that, and they understand the way supply chains work. And Nvidia is really good at the compute part. Plus, they've already committed themselves to saying they want to build this full stack AI business and factory. And I think that the humanoid robot for today is kind of the aspiration that they have. But to be fair, I think this idea that robotics is something in which NVIDIA is going to participate, particularly as they can embed artificial intelligence inside of those robots, I think it's going to become really, really important. And I believe, and I think NVIDIA believes this as well, that the most valuable layer in humanoid robotics is the intelligence layer. Those robots can look like whatever they want. And at some level, they do need sort of the hand dexterity that we were talking about, depending on what the task is that they're going to be asked to do. But at some level, no matter what the robot looks like, no matter what its appearance is, that intelligence layer and application framework, and NVIDIA's ahead here, is going to be able to make any kind of robot body useful, I believe. And NVIDIA appears to be positioning itself in this case, I wouldn't say as like the Android layer, because Android is kind of ubiquitous now across all phones. Again, let's not go down the rabbit hole of like who makes more money. Apple definitely makes more money in the phone space. But Android is on televisions, it's in cars, it's on phones, it's on tablets. That Android sort of ecosystem is everywhere. That operating system is everywhere. And if NVIDIA can then go ahead and make sure that its robotics ecosystem and software business is everywhere, embedded inside of any kind of robot, whether it's a humanoid robot or not, that's going to be really important and really significant to them. Let's dig a little bit deeper into each one of these things now. What does China's this sort of the situation in China prove about humanoid robot output? Well, it proves that China can mobilize hardware supply chains quickly once a category becomes strategically important. The country already has deep capabilities in motors, batteries, sensors. We know this. They get a lot of this stuff from their EV businesses, right? We saw 10 years ago their EV business was nascent. Now it's dominant. Okay. And all of these things, even their engineering skills, are all directly relevant to humanoid robots. It does not yet prove, and again, we touched on this a little bit, it does not yet prove that these humanoid robots are commercially indispensable. And there is reporting that points to a gap between production momentum and real demand, with many robots still used for demonstrations, research, marketing, or highly constrained tasks rather than broad labor substitution. But we have seen some tests. We talked about this already. And I think these tests are going to proliferate even more widely. Let's see what happens. And the market's moving quickly as well. Let's see what happens with the implementation of these robots at Haneda Airport and see how a bunch of things happens. One is, are the robots going to be able to handle these tasks in a way that's more efficient than a human? Right? Because we take for granted actually that like we can actually get stronger and lift things and build leverage. You know, even just because it's a robot doesn't mean it's necessarily physically stronger than a human. And a lot of the guys and gals, let's just say this is going to be tested in a place where luggage is going to be lifted or transported. A lot of the guys and gals have been trained to understand that thing's small, but it has cameras in it. It says fragile on it. It's an unwieldy shape. Let's get two people to carry it. This is a learned behavior. Do you think two robots are going to be able to look at a piece of luggage and think, it looks like skis, but actually it's a massive piece of steel or metal or whatever it is, and we need two people to lift this thing up? These things are going to have to be learned, right? So the best way to understand what's happening right now, at least as far as I'm concerned, in the robotics place is it's manufacturing before there's a market fit. We don't know yet, right? But again, in the same way that I mentioned earlier, that NVIDIA is saying, we want to build sort of the intelligence layer ecosystem around the robotics, regardless of whether we own the body or not. China's kind of making the reverse decision in this case, it seems to me. And that part of the decision says, we want to build the physical bodies here before even the buyers that we know are out there that are interested in using our products have fully defined the jobs, the roles, whatever it is, and even the budgets, to be fair, and the return on investment that they think these robots are going to engender. And remember as well, humans care about safety. This is hard to explain, right? But humans care about the safety of their environment because they're empathetic about the people that are around them. I don't want to drop like a 30-kilogram piece of luggage on the guy next to me's foot. I'm going to be more careful. It may even not force me, but it may encourage me to say to that guy who's next to me, hey, let's lift this thing together so neither one of us, we don't hurt our back, we don't hurt our arms, and I don't drop it on your foot if somehow something happens. Can we get robots to understand this? Right? Because again, if the piece of luggage or the piece of thing that they're lifting actually ends up being unwieldy, hard to lift, even if it's not that heavy, like there's some boxes where I can lift the weight. It doesn't matter. I can do 30, 40, 50 kilos. It doesn't matter. But the shape is just weird and it's hard to get a grip on it. But two humans can figure that out and they can look at each other and they can talk to each other and see like whether this actually works or not. It'll be interesting to see if, excuse me, if the robots can do that as well. So finally, why is NVIDIA working with Unitree and Sharpa instead of building the whole robot itself? Well, because NVIDIA's advantage here is not mechanical manufacturing. Its advantage is compute, AI models, simulation, software building, all this kind of stuff, and the developer tools. Remember, CUDA is really important here. Microsoft was actually really good about this, again, in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. They built a whole set of developer tools, which made it easy for developers to develop on their platform. You can't think of these humanoid robots as anything different than a compute platform. And if NVIDIA is really good at building those developer tools, then that's going to be really beneficial for them. Their robot Isaac Groot GR00T is described by NVIDIA as a research initiative and development platform for robot foundation model and data pipelines. All that stuff is going to be super important. Unitree provides a kind of capable humanoid body. Remember, those are going to get better too. So as the software and the intelligence layer gets better from NVIDIA, we know for sure that the humanoid body layer is going to get better too. That's just like they're just going to keep iterating on this stuff, and that's just going to keep getting better as well. And I said this before. I'm really fascinated by like the hands, and I think that the sort of product manipulation or the hand manipulation is one of the hardest parts of humanoid usefulness. And Sharpa says its wave hand has 22 degrees of freedom and is designed for embodied AI research and robot original OEM integration. Sometimes I just can't remember what those things mean. NVIDIA is trying to reduce fragmentation as well. A reference design gives researchers and developers a shared target. Like I said earlier, everybody can look at like the Microsoft Surface and say, okay, I know what that looks like. It looks like it's going to be a popular device. Let's use that shared design, at least for iteration one. And instead of forcing everybody to figure out what everything's going to look like from scratch on their own, they can look at that reference device and say, I get it. This is the way we want to build. Now we have the AI layer, the software layer, the development tool layer, and the humanoid body layer. But we can stitch all these things together, not from scratch, and build something that's actually going to make sense. Now, another question we need to answer is like we already said, like supply is definitely outstripping demand for now. At some point, my guess is going to be that demand is going to outstrip supply. We'll get to that when that happens. We'll cross that bridge when that actually happens. But what has to happen for humanoid robots to become like serious commercial tools? Well, they need repeatable jobs where humanoids form creates a real advantage, right? Where the form of the robot, the embedded software, the artificial intelligence that embedded into it actually creates a real advantage. Warehouses, factories, you can see certain places, and security. I would actually say like, you know, bomb scares, getting mines out of the land or out of the ocean would be something, because if it blows up, if somebody dies or if the robot gets hurt, nobody really cares. And from an expense standpoint, you'd rather have a robot have that happen to it than a human, for sure, 100% for sure. Um, but those are the places where these types of things will happen first. But robots, they need better manipulation. They need more reliable autonomy. They need safer movement around people. We talked about this, right? Like, can a robot actually figure out how to be safe around people? And does it care? How do we make it care? Right. And this NVIDIA reference robot that we were talking about already is aimed at robot foundation models that can reason from vision and language. But again, this stuff is super hard and generate the sort of necessary motor actions to achieve a task. But this is still an active research problem. Again, when we were at AI Enterprise in Singapore a few weeks ago, we talked to some people that were actually building robots. The robot itself is not that hard to build, but the nuances that get built into them, particularly from an AI intelligence layer standpoint, is where the rubber really hits the road here. These robots need data. So one of the things that one of the guys told us was that like his particular robots don't necessarily need to be connected to the internet or connected to a data source, that all of it lives like on chip and on-prem on the robot itself. I would say this though. Physical artificial intelligence needs real world trajectories. They even need some synthetic data. They need to be like properly simulated so they can figure out like what exactly happenings here. And all that stuff is going to happen for these humanoid robots to actually be useful. This is my really strong opinion on this. And finally, who's going to capture the value if humanoid robots work? Well, China's well positioned, as we mentioned earlier, in the hardware layer, because it can scale production and lower costs quickly. Unitree is just a perfect example of this. Their visibility shows how Chinese firms can turn humanoids into a manufacturable product category faster than many Western competitors can. And I think that that's important. Nvidia's positioning for the platform layer. So that's actually quite important as well. Awesome. And compute, robot foundation model, simulation deployment tools, and security. If many robot makers standardize around NVIDIA's stack, NVIDIA could capture value even when it doesn't own the robot body. We are getting very close to bringing in our first guest, Wei-Chuan. So let's do that as soon as we possibly can, Martin. That would be super great. I am ready for that whenever you are. And that's where the value is actually going to fall out. So, Wei-Chuan, are you there? How are you? You can hear me okay? It is awesome to have you. Hopefully you saw our segment on Nvidia and Unitree and China building some stuff in the humanoid robot space. But before we don't need to talk about that now. Let's talk about you. Thank you for coming in and joining us today. We wanted to have you on because we wanted to talk about how AI-powered hiring platforms, this is important to me because we've had a bunch of discussions on this recently, are helping employers, in your case in Indonesia, find better talent faster while widening access to job skills and career mobility. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about KitaLulus and the other things you're working on in relation to that as well.
Absolutely. So I've spent a lot of time in recruitment, first through KitaLulus Indonesia, and now through Kita HQ, an AI interview platform.
Yeah? Yep.
That's right. So it's essentially the same team, the same company. What KitaLulus gave us is deep exposure to the mass market recruitment in Indonesia. And through the experience, we have really built Kita HQ, which is this AI recruitment platform that does AI interviews. And what we help employers do, not just in Indonesia now, across Asia, is helping them with screening candidates, running screening interviews, and help them reduce time to hire by 50%.
Reduce time to hire by 50%.
Yeah, so the employers that we work with today, in the past, they would have a multi-step process because recruitment is not just a matching problem, it's a workflow problem.
Yeah, for sure.
sourcing of candidates. You have people, hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications coming in. There's all that coordination that you do with hiring managers, the documentation around it. So we try to automate and help recruiters with that workflow. And through that experience, our recruiters are reporting a 50% reduction in time to hire. So in the past, it may take 50 days to fill the position, and now they're filling in 25.
Okay, I want to get back to time to hire in a second because I do think it's important. And at the end of this conversation, we're going to talk about retention, which in my mind is probably even more important than time to hire. Because what did my teacher, I think it was one of my teachers in 9th grade, said to me, it's good to go fast, but it's not good to hurry, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And he was talking mostly about driving. And one of the reasons why, he was like, it's okay to go fast, but when you're hurrying, you're more likely to get into an accident. So I want you to keep that in your mind when we talk about retention later. But let's back up for a second and let's talk about what specific hiring problems is Kita HQ trying to solve with this AI-powered video interviewer that like the traditional way of recruiting couldn't handle. Is it just scale? Right, in the sense that like you can have 100 people interviewing for the same job on the same day at the same time and use that as a filtering mechanism. And then maybe run me through, so what's the problem you're trying to solve? And then how does it actually solve it? How does it work? And why is it so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the big part of it is scale, definitely, especially when you're hiring, you're doing mass recruitment. It's definitely a scale problem. It's also a consistency problem. So our clients are not just hiring in one outlet, one location. They're often hiring across the country.
So what types of clients are these?
Yeah, so we serve financial institutions, education institutions, retail companies, multinational companies that are hiring across salespeople across the region. And many of them have this scale issue. In addition to that, they also want to make sure there's consistency because, for example, if you're hiring in Singapore, if you want to hire a role in Jakarta, you want to make sure there's some consistency across the board. And so our platform helps make sure there's some of that consistency. And then the third problem that it addresses is also a coordination problem. So oftentimes when you're dealing with multiple candidates, multiple hiring managers, there's a lot of that coordination that happens. So what we're trying to do is really try to streamline that process and automate that workflow.
So how does AI help with the coordination part of this? In other words, does it have access to your calendar? Does it send you emails to remind you to do this thing? Does it do some follow-up for you? Like, where is it helping on the coordination side?
It's a combination of all that. So
go for it.
So for example, at the very basic level today, with the AI interviewer, you're now able to invite candidates and you sort of remove that back and forth process of coordinating when you do that screen interview. Because candidates can do that interview at their own convenience, at their own comfort, their homes. And you can do that interview at 3 p.m. or you can do that at 10 p.m. Right? So that there's one layer of coordination that's being removed. I think the second part of it is also the reminders that recruiters are able to send to candidates, not just via email. In the region, many of the candidates they default to a chat platform, right? So in Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, it's WhatsApp. In Thailand, it's Line. So we do a lot of that, like reminders to WhatsApp, for example. And then the third part of it, when it comes to coordination with hiring managers, is that oftentimes in the past, it's an email that recruiters will send to hiring managers saying that these are the profiles, these are the resumes attached. Now, talent acquisition teams and recruiters are able to provide hiring managers with a much richer profile. So they're able to send them not just the resume, and at the same time, they're able to share with them, hey, this is the initial screening interview. These are all the questions they've answered, and this is a initial assessment report.
So can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
In my memory, I remember plenty of times when I was working at Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs or whatever, like doing my job, the market closed, I was finished, and someone literally just came over to my desk and said, hey, Michael, here's the resume. Lisa's here from, MIT. Can you go talk to her? I'm like, that's all the prep I get. You know what I mean? Like I had no time to try to figure out like where she would fit in or what her skill set was or why her resume was better than anybody else who went to MIT or wherever.
Absolutely.
What kind of work does it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
But what kind of work does it create? Because at some level, the agent has to know, the AI interviewer has to know what the hiring manager wants. So it can't be kind of this seat of the pants thing where just like an AI interviewer shows up, right?
Absolutely.
I'm not done yet. Sorry, I was just clearing my throat. Where the AI interviewer just shows up and does stuff. They have to have all this information beforehand as well. So there are two questions. One is, how involved is the hiring manager? Because it's way extra work, right? Because normally a hiring manager just has all this information in his or her head. He can just like I said, come over to my desk and Michael, just go talk to Lisa. Like there's not a lot of work there. It's not good, but it's at least not a lot of work. But now that's changed. And the second thing is, I may have been asked to interview Lisa because I'm sitting in Japan, but Lisa's from California, not from Tokyo. So I'm a more appropriate person, leaving all of their biases aside, because I can do a better evaluation of her than somebody maybe who's Japanese can do. So how do you solve all of those sort of nuanced problems with the AI? Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. I don't think we have all the answers to that. I think we're definitely working towards that. What we do today is that we try to use existing artifacts that are available. So one of the things that hiring managers and recruiters have aligned on, even before the job has been posted, is the job description. So
but writing a JD is hard.
Yeah, but so it's usually they have aligned on that, right? So we would then have recruiters input that JD into our system. And then based on that, we are actually able to generate customized questions and suggest some of the things we use to actually run an initial screening on the candidates. So that's what we start with.
Got it. And how much sort of iterative input is put into that, if you know what I mean? In other words, so that's like the initial thing. But let's say they come back and like, we're not finding any candidates, or the questions we're asking aren't really working. I can always adjust in real time. I'm like, this person's not really reacting to me in the right way. I think I need to ask other things to get better information. And to be fair, sometimes I remember being in interviews where I'm just like, I give up. This person's useless. But is the AI interviewer going to keep going, until the end, or are they just going to be like, this is a waste of my, because it's not really a waste of their time per se, but it's kind of wasting the candidate's time at some level. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you look at research to try and figure out what are the things, the techniques that actually has predictive power when it comes to recruiting.
Right.
Structured interview is actually one of it. So if you run an unstructured interview versus a structured interview, a structured interview has actually a higher predictive power as to whether someone will come in and perform on the job. So what we aim to do is to first of all run a structured interview for all the candidates. And so
the same questions, the same
similar
framework,
questions,
the same order, the same thing.
That's right.
Can I ask you this though? Because a lot of times, like even in a structured interview, unless it's really just like data extraction, right? Like how tall, no one's going to ask this, but like how tall are you? It's kind of a, it's easy to figure out like, are you 180 centimeters tall kind of thing. But if I asked you like, what was the most challenging thing you've ever done and how do you handle it, which is a typical sort of interview question, maybe it's a little bit unstructured, but you understand the point. The follow-up is almost more important than that.
Absolutely.
So how are you handling all that stuff as well?
So we combine those two things, right? So maybe just sharing a bit of my experience interviewing while I was at McKinsey. And so we run a structured interview, right? So every interview has a case study component, and there are a few other leadership qualities you're looking for, right? A few other personal traits, leadership qualities you're looking for. And every interview you go into, you're asking similar questions, right? Similar questions. Of course, the follow-up questions will be different. And you're trying to, at the end of the day, assess all candidates based on a consistent metric, right? So that's what we try to do. So the questions will be similar. However, the follow-up questions will be different. So AI would then tailor the follow-up questions based on the answers provided by the candidates. So that's what we do.
Okay, I really want to try this process because I want to see what it feels like to get a follow-up question from an AI interviewer. A lot of times the interviews would be like very personalized. I know maybe not like in the first round, right? But I've been in a lot of interviews where it's very personalized, particularly for experienced people as well. Do you also feel like that there's an aspect of the standardization of the interview, right? The structured interview that you're doing for the first cut means that you're going to end up with the same type of people for any particular role. So instead of having like 20 people that are different, we're like, you know what, Bob doesn't really have any experience per se in this, but I feel like his other experience could be super relevant in ways that we didn't understand. So we're going to hire him along with this other person, Lisa, to fill these two roles because working together would be better. Or do you feel like having this sort of standardized structured thing is going to get just like standardized structured employee hiring? Right. Because one of the things that's important to you is this democratization of access to jobs. So are we going to turn that around and make it less accessible because we're only asking the same questions to everybody?
It's a great question. How do you do this while ensuring there's diversity, right?
Yeah.
In your recruitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way we think about it is that the screening interview at the end of the day allows companies to be able to prioritize what's important to them, what are the criteria, and then be able to screen everyone on a consistent manner, right? So it's a good point, right? So if let's say the criteria that are being used initially may not encourage diversity, it's definitely something that will need to be improved, right? Will need to be improved.
Yep.
I think that the way we think about the tool is that what we want to do is to be able to support companies in being able to do a lot of this mass recruitment in a consistent manner, and then be able to then sort of surface up all these candidates, so that now companies don't just focus on the top 1, 2, 3 candidates, but they're able to cast the net a little wider and interview, say, the top 10 candidates. And based on that, with additional information, you are able to then make a more informed decision. So for example, if the company at the end of the day is trying to hire someone with a more differentiated experience, you can always go into the tool and basically customize how the assessment works. And through that, you're able to then surface more of these candidates. So what the tool does is it actually allows recruiters, because in the past you're constrained by time, you may only interview 3 candidates. Now you're able to cast the net a little wider, interview more candidates, and then surface up the right information.
Can we just go back to this thing that I asked earlier, because I'm not sure we answered this properly? Are we adjusting the type of, because I presume that there's a video component to the interview as well, that it's sort of this humanoid representation of what an interviewer should look like. Do I have that right?
Yes. So we don't create that avatar at this point.
You don't? Okay.
We don't. It's a voice-based interview. So the interviewer will be asking questions by voice, and then the candidate's response, both video and audio, will be recorded and transcribed.
So this is the other thing that I want. It feels a little asymmetric to me in a way, right? Because you're being like, I hate when people do this to me, but you tell me how it feels, in the sense that if you're recording my audio and video, but you're just like an audio thing, it feels a little bit unfair. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what you look like. I don't know what your facial expression's like when I say, like, I'm a huge Red Sox fan and you're like a Yankees fan. It's like, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So when do you get to the point where you're going to build like a humanoid so that people can actually feel like they're interacting more comfortably with someone that's on their level, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's a totally fair point. And the way we think about it is that it's when is the right time to do it. Because once you create an avatar, I think that the bar for that naturalness goes up, right? So I think that like AI today, the voice is very natural sounding. We are able to run interviews in multiple local languages in Asia. So we think that the bar, it's already available and we can do that very well. For the avatar, it's something that still feels a bit
clunky.
Unnatural. So that's something we're waiting a little longer. We're trying to work on many of that sort of workflows and smoothen out that process for recruiters. And I think that's going to come.
So I know that this is just sort of the first cut of the interviews, right? So you're just trying to sort of filter out people that just aren't appropriate, right? So if you're hiring somebody to do like garbage collection, you want to make sure that they're comfortable with garbage collection, kind of thing, right? Like you don't want to have somebody who's like an actuary interviewing for a job for garbage collection. It's just not a fit at a super high level. But at the end of the day, most people just want to work with people that they like. But like on the margin, even if the skill set is slightly deficient, it's relevant, but it's slightly deficient. People want to work with someone that they like. And I know it's just kind of like the first round that the artificial intelligence is doing. But how do you judge for like company culture and company culture fit, and whether that person is actually going to be liked or likable enough? I guess people can watch the video, but then it's not saving them a ton of time if they have to watch the video. Do you know what I mean? Yep,
absolutely. I think that, so companies, at the end of the day, companies are made of humans, and humans want to work with other humans that they like, right? Absolutely. That's without question. At the same time, from a candidate experience perspective, one of the biggest complaints that we know exist today are candidates that never hear back from recruiters. Right. So we want to be able to sort of streamline that workflow, enable candidates to be able to apply, get the experience to be able to, once they qualify, do an interview with the company, and very soon hear back from the company, right? So that's what we're trying to
That's what you're
address.
optimizing for.
Yes. I think the second part of it is then by companies being able to run this process much faster, cast the net a little wider, you're able to then assess more candidates and determine who is the best fit for the role.
Got it.
And the AI never makes the final decision.
No, for sure.
Yeah, control always. None of our clients have ever hired someone by just looking at the videos or the reports that we have.
Yeah.
And there is someone there's a hiring manager, there's a HR manager making a decision. And I think that's where there are additional questions, there's additional fit assessment that happens, and making sure that the candidates will join companies that they like, and recruiters hire candidates that will succeed at the company.
Okay, I'm going to let you go. That was really, really interesting. Thank you for being so open with this stuff, and thank you for being so generous. It's been a complete pleasure for me as well. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Okay, Martin, let's bring in Ganesh, actually, the head of engineering and product at Pando, to talk about some AI-powered logistics stuff. Ganesh, can you hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, let's get you into the main room, and then we can actually get our conversation started. It's great to have you here, by the way. It's a complete pleasure. Okay. So Ganesh, thank you very much again, as I said, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I love the simplicity of your background. It's really, really great. We wanted to have you on actually to have a serious conversation about how AI-powered logistics platforms are helping enterprises turn supply chains from just like reactive operations into autonomous decision systems. And before we get to that in detail, let's learn a little bit about Pando, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Ganesh Kumar Ramachandran. People used to call me Gramcha. I joined Pando 7 years ago.
Okay,
I'm one of the early employee who built this product from the scratch. Pando is into transport management system, which covers freight procurement till freight settlement. Pando has been doing this for past 7 years. We are more into operational intelligence in terms of enabling the customers do the day-to-day freight transportation in a very cleaner way, where they will save money in terms of executing the freights in our system. It's not just a digitization. We are also focusing on saving the money out of this using TMS platform. We generally used to say that if you buy our planning tool, which will save you money, if you look at that contribution out of the planning savings, whatever customers paying Pando is a peanut. So we are not just digitizing the product, entire TMS operation. We are also focusing on saving money to our customers.
I mean, the logistics business are so non-trivial, right? That the places where you can save money are probably voluminous. You just have to find them in the value chain. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit as well. Is where do most enterprise logistics lose the most value before Pando? Yeah, even after years of sort of, like you said, digital transformation or digitization, but a lot of that focused on, not understanding the value chain where the costs were, but just like where we could turn things from analog into digital stuff, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So a lot of enterprise customers either having TMS that coming part of the standard ERP systems, which is not very user friendly when when I say it won't connect with all the entities participate in day-to-day logistics operation. For example, it won't have a proper vendor portal, supplier portal, consignee portal, driver, carrier, all those things. So Pando coming into picture where it will connect all these entities. Also, it connect to the ERP system for getting order management system data into our system. And we'll do the planning, shipment execution from the, for example, orders coming from ERP to Pando, and then we will run automatically dispatch planning in our system. When we say dispatch planning, it is not just a route optimization problem. Basically, what we try to differentiate from other competitor is we are trying to save money out of the planning. For example, if you look at the larger trucks, you already have the fixed routes which can operate in any country. Larger trucks cannot go into smaller roads or streets where you can easily find the shortest path, right? So this is already fixed path. So what we try to do is we try to find the cheapest vehicle which can be used for given orders on that particular day or run. So whenever we try to find a cheapest vehicle, we ensure that we are taking the maximum utilization of that vehicle so that you won't lose any money. If you are taking a FTL contract for 20 ton, you're paying, let's say, $5,000. And if your vehicle utilization is less than 80%, then basically you are losing money, right? So these optimizations we are focusing, and wherever we be able to create a PTL intent, say I am having a dispatch orders for today. If I try to form a FTL vehicle, I need to form two vehicle, where one vehicle is 100% utilized, another vehicle is 10% utilized. System will automatically suggest the PTL for those 10% of orders, so that you won't spend money on entire second FTL truck. So that is one way to save money. Another way to save money is like Pando has a 35 odd enterprise customers in our systems, where we have the cost of each and every lane, different vehicle types, different service level in our system. So whenever enterprise customers going for a freight procurement periodically, like a 6 months once or a yearly once, they can use our freight procurement tool, where you can tap into the Pando network suggested rates. For example, if you are a shipper, you only know, let's say 10 or 20 carriers, Pando can suggest unknown carriers to you, which is part of enterprise system ecosystem. And that will save you money with the average value across the lanes.
Yeah, I want to get back to that in a second, right? Because I think an unknown, you're talking about carriers. Yeah, unknown carriers. There's a trust component involved there as well, right? It's like one of the reasons why I don't deal with people that I don't know is because I don't know them, right? Because I don't have any track record with them. So the fact that it's going to save me money will not necessarily be a big benefit for me, because now I have to make a risk return calculation as well, and I may not understand what the return is, but I do understand what the risk is, and vice versa. But before we get to that, all of this stuff seems to be sort of data related, right? You can't do any of this sort of predictive analysis or even like post facto analysis unless you have data that's clean. And I'm curious how effective logistics companies have been, enterprise logistics companies have been at getting their data in a state or in a shape that allows all of these decisions to be made in a way that has confidence and imbues trust. Does that make sense?
Yes. Most of our enterprise customers are having some sort of a ERP system, and all those systems are interconnected into our Pando networks via API or EDA or SFTP, some sort of integration format which we support. When enterprise customer having integrations like these, typically their data flows into Pando, and Pando will do some sort of a cleanup and put it into our system. Similarly, when we are sending back to their systems, we will format it back to the customer's system. The main idea here, we have a transformation layer where we don't ask our customers to send data in a Pando format.
Sure.
Whatever format you are having, you can send it into our system, and we will transform it back to Pando format. Similarly, when we are sending back to them, we will transform that into their system. All this transformation happening in a middleware layer where you don't have to write any codes for each of these format. We don't do any deployments. It's more of a configuration kind of a thing. It will automatically transform. Since you are getting a real-time data from integration point of view, the data which you are getting is most recent one and hygiene one. And also we calculate a lot of other data points or signals out of this data. For example, I am receiving an order information from ERP. I'm doing dispatch planning. If I am going to say that, hey, you are forming a PTL intent today, but if you hold it for 1 or 2 days and sending it part of FTL shipment 2 days later or whenever next run happen, you can save some money. to say this information, I need to have the clarity of what is the backing data for this, right? For example,
Yeah.
if this order going to a customer, end customer, is SLA needs to be known, and this profit margin needs to be known, or what is the churn percentage for this particular end customer. If all this information is available part of our signal network, then AI model can take the informed decision. Instead of just saying, hey, you can convert this PTL into FTL if you save money. Instead, if this is a high risk order, even saving money doesn't matter, right?
Matter,
You
yeah.
have to submit today. So
Yeah.
that kind of informed decisions are taken when we have the clean data points in our system.
Got it. Can I ask you this though? Like, who's doing the data entry into the ERP system? If that's going to be the basis for where the orders are coming from, that's getting fed into the sort of optimization engine. I guess my only concern here is that humans sometimes get lazy, right? And the only orders you really want to service are the ones that have actually been approved, or someone's like made a down payment, you know, all that kind of stuff where it's actually real, as opposed to somebody putting something in, getting tired, going outside, having a cigarette, and coming back in and seeing that an agent has already acted on it and thinking, oh, that order wasn't valid yet. I was just like, do you know what I mean? I was just kind of getting it ready. And that could literally throw a spanner in the works for vehicle optimization, route optimization, all other stuff, because that order itself isn't real, if that makes sense. So who's doing the data entry there? And the follow-up to that, so keep both of these things in mind, because I think it's really important, is that as these ERP systems become agentic AI compatible, right? So MCP compatible, and all of the functionality is exposed to an API, how does that change the interaction and even the workflows with it if now they're interacting with an agent as opposed to somebody inputting data?
Yeah. So the data getting entered into ERP is basically their order management team or a sales team who receive orders from customer.
Right.
And there are different type of orders, right? For example, sales order which shipper gets from their customer.
Mhm.
Similarly, there is another type of order called stock transfer order. Basically, from factory, you move these order into your DC locations. So those kind of orders will be generated from either talking to DC guy or a factory whoever manufacturing that. And there are some orders which is kind of a inbound to the manufacturing. For example, if I want to manufacture some cookies, I need atta, sugar, all those things, right? These information will flow from vendor. So these orders will be generated by some team which is part of the ecosystem already in all manufacturing plant, and that will get flow into our system. And what was your second follow-up question on this?
What happens? Like, how does the interaction change when agentic AI is actually, when agents are actually allowed to interact with the ERP system directly, as opposed, in other words, somebody externally, right, can connect to the API and say, here's my order. This order is valid. I've paid for the, or whatever it is. I will pay using my normal payment plan, whatever that is. And boom, the order gets put in. And now that gets embedded into the logistics. Like, what kind of type, how does that change the relationship? How does it change the business? How does it change the optimization? Because, and I'll give you an example. When I was sitting on a portfolio trading desk, I sometimes used to anticipate orders from my clients. I'd be like, they did this the last 3 days in a row, so I'm going to build an order that has, like, do you know what I mean, certain components in it, and I can fill in the fine details later, but it's still sitting in my order management system in the same way that that order still sits in the ERP system. Do you know what I mean? And if I died, somebody would look at it and be like, what do I do with this order? So if orders are coming in externally, how do they get checked? What does agentic AI mean now in the context of putting orders into the ERP system if a human's not going to do it directly?
Yeah. So pretty much enterprise systems are a little rigid for opening the direct ERP connection to the third-party systems. And
Today?
always, today.
Yeah.
And always coming with the some sort of a contract alignment between the system. For example, when we integrate with the ERP system of our customers, we'll go and discuss what kind of data flow into our system, similarly what we post back to their system. And both of these systems already exposing certain APIs which will satisfy some of our basic day-to-day operations. On top of this, exposing a MCP connector for any AI integration will open up a channel for anybody can build a custom agents on top of this ERP system.
Okay.
Without you go and write a custom ERP solution inside the ERP, using the available APIs, you can build on top of this custom agents if MCP is available. That's where the AI will open up the possibility. Even though, for example, today Pando mainly focusing on TMS solution. Some of our customers asking us to build. Hey, you have the transportation data which says from factory A to customer A, some data materials going. Similarly, from DC1 to customer A also going. But you know the data point saying if I am sent from DC, I will save some money instead of sending from factory as well. So these kind of data points will flow into our system if there is a MCP endpoints available, and that can be fed into our system that will leverage beyond the basic functionality of the model and entering into inventory suggestions saying, instead of creating order to factory A to consignee A, create from DC1 to consignee A. Those kind of solutions also possible.
Got it. So there are lots of, you mentioned that some of these systems are really rigid, right? That some of these ERP systems have a sort of a sense of rigidity built into them. But sometimes when you employ agentic AI and frankly any other kind of artificial intelligence, the workflow itself actually needs to change to garner the most efficiencies. So how do you, inside this slightly rigid or maybe understood to be rigid system of ERP, how do you build in new workflows so that the AI can be as efficient as possible and then create the most savings as you've been suggesting during this entire conversation? Do you know what I mean? Because if it's rigid, then the workflow can't change. But if it needs to change to build the most efficiency and so that the AI can do the work that it can do in a way that a human could never do it. Yeah.
Yeah, minimalistically, those ERP system need to expose some data points which is not already available in order to take a informed decision using any AI agents.
Right.
Even if you are trying to build any new agents outside ERP on top of ERP, basic data points needs to be, at least for a read standpoint, you need to get some data so that you can provide a valuable suggestion. If we get the right access via right APIs, that will be even greater, where all execution can be happen part of the agent. So it is at the IT management team of customer side who need to expose certain API for the business needs, which is either readily available, or if they don't have, they need to expose it like a basic CRUD operation, so that outside ERP we can build whatever needed for the business requirement.
And how can the companies actually figure out, I don't know, like in a KPI way, whether this sort of AI-driven logistics is creating real strategic value for them and not just cutting costs, right? Because at some level, they should get the data that they have should give them way more information and allow them to improve and increase their business in a way that's not just related to cost cutting. So how do they know? And then what types of signals should they look for? And how can they judge? Like, how do they determine what the ROI is and whether they're meeting their KPIs based on the fact that they're using this AI in a way that they weren't using it before?
Okay, so if anyone looking at modernizing their digitization using AI, right, it means that they are already digitized, okay? And if you are looking at stages or phases of digitization journey, they are pretty much into 3 stages, I would say. First one is basic digitization, where somebody operated at a Excel level or manually in paper pen. They digitize the system. After that, they build a visibility dashboard kind of information where somebody can inform what is happening in the system. Third one is partially, not every company build the prediction model, right? For example, when I create a shipment, I can predict whether the carrier will accept it within a SLA hour or will he arrive to the loading point on time. These kind of prediction can be partially somebody build it, somebody is not yet built. But beyond this, are we collecting a lot of other signals which will enable us to take a intelligent standpoint? For example, now systems start reasoning by connecting a lot of these entities. When I say shipment, if you look at it, typical database standpoint, there will be a source, destination, carrier, vehicle type, all these things in one or more tables in the system. If you try to reasoning with that, you every time you have to code in a specific way that will give you only selected data points, but assume everything as a knowledge graph. Okay, so shipment, customer, sales order, SLA, carrier, contract, inventory requirement, all these are entities and connected each one with the corresponding data. Now if you have the, if you can start questioning from any point of view, right? For example, you can say, hey, what are the shipments these customers are getting? You can start from customer. Similarly, you can say, hey, what are the locations these carriers are serving? So if you connect every node in the system as an entity, it will provide you the intelligence which cannot be provided in a very straightforward way in a traditional database modeling. So the system will help you in saying this delay will be because SLA breach on customer X. Customer X is a strategic account. This will never come into your typical existing digitization story. So what type of questions can be answered if we have an intelligent network connects? What does this matter and what should we do with this? So these kind of questions can be answered if I have a knowledge graph kind of a solution that interconnects all the entity in logistics and supply chain story. Once this is there, then assisted execution will happen. For example, now the system helps resolving the issue. For example, email agents will automatically do the carrier follow-up, customer notification, internal escalation, and also you can build a analysis, auditing kind of AI agents where provide you the impact summary, alternate routing option, cost implication, just chatting with the natural language. And one important thing is documents which involves during logistics and supply chain, validating those documents, especially when you are doing export import, lot of customs things, country specific validation you need to do. Today it is a very human centric, and if you making any mistake on that, basically you will spend either delay or money out of complaint specific. So these spaces where AI will help you to provide you the document compliance intelligence out of these knowledge graph data, and also help you to answer how do we resolve this quickly. Once these parts is completed, then autonomous execution coming, right? For example, user can come and say what type of policies you want to set if there is a ETA delay which is more than 48 hours, and also say shipment value greater than 100K, evaluate alternate routing. Some sort of a policy configuration, if you set it, AI will automatically trigger this workflow whenever there is a ETA slips greater than 48 hours and shipment value exceeds more than 100K. It will automatically find the alternate carrier contracts. If there are no contracts, it will generate a spot RFQ quotes, check the complaints requirements, documents for alternate route, and also finally human in the loop, like it will send the approval mail to the shipper. If he approves it, it will get executed.
Okay,
So
Grafter, let's do this. We're running a little bit over time. This has been really interesting, and I really want to thank you for coming in and doing this today. We're just gonna move on and say thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It's super interesting stuff today, particularly in the logistics space. Okay, thank you so much, Martin. Let's bring in Oliver too as well. Oliver, how are you? Good afternoon to you as well. Can you hear me okay? Super duper. It's great to have you. Let's just get you in the main room, and then we'll just jump right in. Okay, there you are. So we want to welcome Oliver too to the program. We wanted to have you in to talk about a pretty interesting topic. I want to dig deeply into this: how automated SPV and syndicate infrastructure helps founders, angels, and venture investors execute startup investments faster, cheaper, and with less operational complexity. So I guess I've kind of explained it a little bit, but just give me a little bit more detail about Auptimate, and then we can jump into why this is all necessary and fun.
Yes, thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. So at Auptimate, we've decided to solve a problem that hasn't really been solved in other markets in the United States, mainly where the first trend came in Europe, but pretty much in Asia hasn't really been tackled until we started operating 3 years ago. Essentially, it was the idea of the ability to deploy capital quite quickly, pool capital from investors in a manner that doesn't require heavy costs from lawyers, corporate services providers, tax advisors, opening a bank account that takes usually a very long time, and pretty much having a solution where you can get a pooling vehicle up and ready within a couple of days, so that you can deploy your capital and not miss on opportunities that might move away quite quickly if you don't have the infrastructure needed for that. So what do we do? It's basically an online portal where you log in, you get your KYC, you get verified within 15 minutes, and you can design your investment vehicle. We prepare everything, pretty much the documentation. We set up the vehicle, we open the account, and you're up and ready to deploy within a couple of days.
How do I know? So I find it insanely amazing that it's able to set up an SPV or any other investment vehicle in a couple of days. I tried to set something up with a business partner of mine a long time ago, and it was literally like we ended up not doing it because it was going to cost us literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is. I think you just made that face like, really? But you know that that's true. So I guess my question is like, one, how do I know? And what sort of information do you provide for people that want to have an investment entity, but kind of don't know what the right entity is? The second thing is, how do they know what the, what's the right word? The domain location is supposed to be as well, right? Like, should this SPV be set up in the Virgin Islands? Should it be set up in Singapore? Should it be set up in, the Jersey Islands? Like, how do I know that? And the third thing is, how can you make it so much less expensive? Because the people that are doing the work must be the same people that I would call on my own. So why are they doing it cheaper for you than they would do it for somebody else? I know it's a lot there, but like, how do I know what type of vehicle I'm supposed to have? How do I know what my domain is supposed to be? And then why is it so much less expensive to deal with you as opposed to do it sort of piecemeal?
Yes, so these are all very good questions, and actually the answer is all intertwined, right? So
yeah, for sure.
We as ex-lawyers, ex-professionals in the sector, want to come up with the solutions where we solve all of that for you. So when we come around and say we have an SPV solution, we're not selling you a jurisdiction or advice, or we're not going to heavily get involved with you to understand all your needs. Instead, we're going to say, well, we've already predetermined essentially what is the best structure. We've chose Singapore, right? Because Singapore is a good jurisdiction, tax, regulatory, and compliance-wise, to get it set up. So we're offering an SPV solution. We're not offering which country do you want to set it up in, because it's somewhat irrelevant at the end of the day. For 99% of the cases, an SPV solution like ours is adapted to needs for cross-border transactions. So to come into your second question, how do we do it at a lower cost? Well, through automation. We in-house everything. Everything is done within. We're not outsourcing to any different providers.
Can you stop for a second? So can you stop that for a second? So that means you have your own legal team, you have your own sort of setup team, you have your own finance team, all this kind of stuff you do internally. And does the size of that team change over time? In other words, if you're helping people create, and I'm just going to make up numbers, like 5 SPVs a week, it doesn't require that many people. But if it's 50, is it 10 times more people? Or is the whole process automated in a way where artificial intelligence is involved and all the other stuff where you just need 7 people to do it as opposed to 10 times more?
I think you've already answered the question, Michael.
Can I go home now, or?
Yeah, I think so you should maybe become an SPV operator. That's the role of tech, and it's our mission to make sure that the cost that it's put out there is standard. But I want also to echo the fact that it's because we've standardized and because we've designed the vehicle, and we've spent a lot of time designing it. By designing it means drafting all the documentation, what typically your lawyers would do. And we've answered all the questions that you typically want to answer. Of course, we're not one size fits all. There are certain clients, if you're doing $100 million PE deal that requires legal counsel from every single investor, we're probably not the right fit. But for anybody that wants to set up an SPV, which is, let's say, below 10 million, with investors which are happy to sign a check and be onboarded in an SPV, we're there for you. If you are an emerging fund manager that wants to launch a fund sub 100 million, we've got the solution for you. So yes, we're highly scalable and we keep our costs low because we're using automation, we're using AI. We are streamlining the process or workflows in the back end, and we make it extremely predictable how we operate these entities because we've designed them. We are deciding what the workflows and the money flows in the SPVs are going to be, and essentially removing that, I would say, mind load from anybody that wants to create a deal.
So where does AI fit in here? And is it agentic AI? Is it predictive AI? Is it generative AI on the contract side? Like, where does it fit in? And maybe you can just walk me through the process of, I want to start an SPV, why I would start an SPV, or maybe you can go a little bit further. Special purpose vehicles are obviously very interesting entities, but there's part of me that's more interested in like the fund side of this.
Yeah.
Setting up a fund is hard, like really hard. I feel like setting up an SPV is easier, and it's all relative to me, right? So it's not easy at any level. But if I want to set up an investment fund, a venture capital fund, frankly, I don't know why anybody would want to do that today. But if I did, because it just doesn't make any sense, particularly in certain regions. But like, because you can't make any money at 10 million bucks. You probably have to get up to a hunch to be able to make enough money to actually run the fund in a way that makes sense. But then once you have $100 million, what are you investing it in? I don't know. These are all questions that are, I guess, outside of the realm of this conversation. But it's like, can you walk me through how a fund setup would go, and then where artificial intelligence would come in to make that way more efficient, besides just the KYC stuff? That's really straightforward, particularly in Singapore, where everybody's identity is digitalized, I guess. But where does it fit in, and why does it make it so much cheaper to do that? Because fund setups are hard.
Yes, so I'll cover that. We've started with SPVs. This is where we've built most of our automation. So we're leveraging AI mostly because we're making our teams a lot more efficient. We've not built agents to solve the problems of clients, but that's going to come in probably towards the end of the year, where our clients will be able to interact through our own agents to answer their questions, namely around the complexity of the vehicle, namely around the process workflows. So that's what we're doing. We're not doing any generative AI. It's all about more leveraging tools from within and to empower our own teams to be a lot more efficient in the way they tackle things. So I think you've said KYC particularly, where we've done you do an individual onboarding within 15 minutes. We're on the path to do entity onboarding, which is eminently very complicated, within a matter of days in the future, where you'll be able to upload your documentation and immediately have an answer on what are the documentation you need, follow-up questions, so as to avoid having to have a lot of back and forth through emails to get your entity onboarded. That's obviously relevant for funds as well. I'll have to admit, to be completely frank, the funds product, we're building it still. We've launched it last year, but how do we do it to keep the costs low? So instead of having to spend $200,000 to get your first product up and running, we can do it at $30K, right? So you get your documentation, getting your fund up and running within a month, and on top of that, you don't have the opportunity cost of having to have the license and getting really involved in all the admin on a day-to-day basis. So you were highlighting, for example, when you launch a $10 million fund, you might not be in the money because of all your costs. If you have like the classic 220, it's not enough. But with our solution, it makes it possible because you don't have that necessary opportunity cost of being 100% involved in being a fund manager. So our mission has always been to try to democratize the access to investment vehicles. So for SPVs, we've done SPVs as small as 40K. It's possible. We now have a solution that allows even somebody, an emerging fund manager, to launch a sub 100, even a $10 million fund, and still make it them worthwhile to give it a try without having to think about right? I have to quit everything and all my activities.
Got it. So with the understanding that the fund product is kind of still a work in progress, how do we get the cost down from $100,000 to $30,000? Can we be more specific about this? And the reason why I'm asking is because, again, just like getting the fund set up, having a lawyer do that, hiring an accountant, like all these little things were very expensive. How do we cut those costs in a way, just besides just like a general thing about we're just way more efficient?
I think it's also us taking the lead. We essentially become the project manager. We're coordinating with the lawyers. We're coordinating with the tax advisors. We set up the vehicle. And because we've standardized the process, and because the options you've got as an emerging fund manager when you use our funds are, yes, rather limited. But let's be honest, in the funds industry, everybody wants run-the-mill ILPA standards, standardizing, because you don't want to surprise your potential LPs that come.
No, they want to invest in the same type of fund that they've invested in already. Just the names on the banner change. That's the thing they care about, but they definitely do not want the underlying structure of that fund to be radically different from what they're used to dealing with. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is what, we, us as ex-professionals, ex-lawyers, we realize clients usually pay top money just because of the inefficiencies of the service providers, of the lawyers. We might not be incentivized in the right way to get it done quickly in a standardized manner.
Believe me, I've dealt with lawyers. I get it. Yeah, it
sorry.
definitely was not optimized for me.
We're ex-lawyers ourselves, so we know that. But it's
and
not
no
just the
insult
lawyers.
intended, but just go ahead. Sorry.
It's all the different service providers, the fragmented space that you need to coordinate. You first need to go to your lawyers, and then you'll need to go to your fund administrator, and then you'll need to find your tax advisors, and then your company secretary to set it up. And all the time you spend, which is also essentially money, coordinating between these players that do not coordinate between themselves and create further inefficiencies. That's usually what leads to these high costs in time, but in also money. So by us taking the lead, you come to us, we'll say, we'll cover you. We have our documentation up and ready. It's pretty much plug and play. Our vehicle is up and running. We've got the bank relationships. We've got the relationship with the auditors. You can't choose who you're going to use, but why should you care? You just want an initial fund to launch. You want to be focused on finding your LPs and deploying, not on all the administrative.
No, nobody cares. At the end of the day, nobody. Like, in a way, I learned this from some of my friends who went to medical school. Nobody cares where you went to medical school when you're operating on them. At the end of the day, you just care, like, are you a good doctor? And I think it's the same thing here. They don't really care, like, who your fund admin person is. At the end of the day, as long as your fund admin person is making the right decisions. Can I ask you this, though, too? Where are most people in Singapore employing a special purpose vehicle to begin with? Like, why are people setting up SPVs? Is there some sort of trend or something that's happening there? Like, why are people doing this so much in Singapore?
I would say I'll step away from Singapore because, for example, out of the 200 plus SPVs that we've done, more than half are not for Singapore deals.
Good for you, by the way. 200.
More than 90 jurisdictions of people coming in. So our clients are not just in Singapore, of course, because we've launched and we're headquartered in Singapore. We've initially tackled that market. But what we've discovered is our solution is a global solution. It's for cross-border global deals. And why would they choose Singapore? Well, again, we don't position ourselves as we're a Singapore SPV provider. We position ourselves that we are an SPV solution provider, a global solution provider. We happen to have a solution that's located in Singapore. And we've chosen Singapore because it's the most efficient one, because it's a digitized country and we can get an SPV up and running within a couple of days.
Got it. Okay. So then where are people employing these SPVs? And you know what I mean? Like, what kind of companies are they building? Why do they need a special purpose vehicle? I'm just curious.
Most of our clients would be, they would fall into three different buckets. I would say largely they are syndicate of angel investors. So an individual deciding that they will try to monetize access to deals, maybe sometimes not even monetize it, just grouping a bunch of friends together to invest in an opportunity that wouldn't be accessible if you want to put 100K ticket.
Yeah, they invest in the SPV, and then the SPV, it makes the angel investment into the target company.
Yeah, you aggregate so that the ticket size is a bit bigger. Your negotiating power, if you've got a bigger ticket size, is better. And also, if you as an investor coming in an SPV, in a syndicate, you've got somebody who's taking the lead and advocating for an exit, really looking after your So we've got the syndicates, where there's a lead, an individual, or sometimes an entity as a business that takes, I would say, the lead in setting up the vehicle. We've got startup founders wanting to set up a vehicle to regroup small ticket angel investors together, so that cap table is not
I was
too
going to say
messy.
the cap table looks cleaner. Yeah. I've talked about this for
Absolutely.
years, right? It's better to have one SPV investing $1 million than like 10 people investing 100 grand, because it's just messy and it looks stupid actually for other investors, for more sophisticated investors. Yeah.
And finally, we've also got fund managers that might want to do a deal-by-deal vehicle on the side, what you typically call a sidecar, instead of doing it through the fund, because they might have an LP that increasingly wants to decide which deal they want to come in. And this is a trend we've seen. Family offices, investors, more and more want to choose the deal they invest in, as opposed to going into a blind pool in a fund. So they want a bit more agency in terms of deciding which deals they're going to participate in or not. So for a lead or even a fund manager, that allows the flexibility of still getting some money which is out there, capturable on a deal-by-deal basis, without having to convince them to come in necessarily in the fund, which might already been closed, or might come in a few years later. So the ability to do something quite quickly, gather interest, and deploy and do a deal within a week.
Makes perfect sense to me. Okay, Oliver, I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate your time today. I have so many more questions about this, but you were very generous with your time, and I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you, and it was great to meet you.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, Michael. All very good questions, and there's hoping that maybe you want to do an SP with us in the future.
Not yet, but thank you for offering. Okay, man, thank you so much. Okay, Martin, let's bring Ankit in as well. Okay, we're just waiting for Ankit Upadhyay, founder and general partner at A2D Ventures, to come in and talk to us about some stuff. As soon as he gets in, we will be ready and willing to go. There we are. Ankit, can you hear me okay? Awesome. How stable is your internet connection, man? How are you? Can you hear me now? How are you doing now?
I can hear you, but it's choppy. Let me try to switch this.
Yeah, let's not try to switch. Let's just see how it goes. Are you okay? Okay, Martin, let's see if we can get Ankit back in. It looks like he was trying to switch his network connectivity, which sometimes happens. That's all okay. This is going to be a pretty good segue, though, because we were just talking to Oliver, too, about how to build SPVs and then how it fits into the sort of early stage capital and angel investing stuff. And one of the things that I do want to talk to Ankit about is like, well, actually, what is the status? How does he feel like? How would he describe the current status? This is probably going to be the first thing I'm asking. As the founder and general partner of A2D Ventures, one of the things that I want to ask Ankit is, when he looks at it today, and I've been involved in the startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia since end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And to be fair, I didn't mention this to Oliver too, our previous guest, but I was actually a limited partner in one of the most, what's the right way to say this? One of the most prominent funds, Ardent Capital, in Southeast Asia, that invested in a bunch of different stuff across the region. Its biggest investment, obviously, was in e-commerce. Ankit, how are you? Way better. Wait, did you like buy a new like gigabit Ethernet connection? Way better.
Oh, I don't know. I just switched from one to the other. I don't know what's going on.
Now you sound like you're rock solid. Okay, thank you so much for coming and doing this. We really appreciate it. We wanted to talk to you, and this is a good kind of segue from our previous guest, as I was saying while we were waiting for you to come in, about how angel investment platforms are changing early stage capital access for Southeast Asian startups. And I would ask you, and I mentioned this again while we were waiting for you to change your network connectivity, how would you characterize the current status? Let's just go right to the beginning here of the Southeast Asian startup ecosystem. And to give you a frame of reference, I started investing in startups in Southeast Asia at the beginning of 2012.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So before you were born. That's a little bit of a joke, but you understand the point. So I've been following this for a while, and I'm curious what you think of, like, how would you characterize it today? And where are you based?
So I'm based in Bangkok for the last 10 years now.
Good idea. I've heard of people that live there. They say it's nice.
Yeah, I think so do you, right? You're just on the street from me.
That's the joke, actually. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just to go back to what you were asking, I mean, there's two different buckets, right? One, what is the state of startups? I think it's hit a good reset over the last couple of years.
It has, yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, the funding overall is down. I mean, we're back to 2017 numbers now, which I think is a good reset. It's going to bring out, in my opinion, the most resilient founders as well as the most patient capital, and hopefully the merge of two is going to create good ventures and good venture outcomes for the next 5 years or so. So I think it's a healthy reset for the ecosystem in general across Southeast Asia. Now, in terms of angel investments,
yeah.
And the space I play in, I think it was super fragmented. We have these loosely defined angel groups in different countries, but I think unlike more mature ecosystems like US or India, Europe, where angel investments is productized, and then productizing it then gives it a certain amount of scale and ability to get broader participation into angel investments, which is basically built around 3 pillars, right? Are you educating the right folks on the asset class? And those are your first-time angels. Second is people who worked in venture-backed companies, whether they were early employees, co-founders, etc. Are they paying it forward and they want to pay it forward? And the third one is when you take the proportion of angel capital into broader early stage, are we at any way or form reaching 10, 15%, which is not just capital, but these angels actually helping these founders, de-risking from, let's say, a pre-seed to a seed round, opening doors, network access, and is that happening at scale, right? So I think that's where the gap is. That's where we sort of came in and said, can we build a large cross-border community of angels across Southeast Asia? And today our community is much bigger. It's not just Southeast Asia, but we have angels and family offices from the Middle East, from India, from Europe, from US, Korea, Taiwan. And I'm very excited about this, right? And we can talk more as we move forward.
Yeah, again, I'm just super curious about this, right? Because one of the things that we ran into so you're right. Let's just back up a little bit. The angel investor ecosystem in Southeast Asia in general, but in Asia in particular, is very fragmented, as you said. And there have been multiple attempts in Bangkok, in Singapore, across the region of kind of consolidating them into a way where, like, you just give us the money and we'll make the investment for you. Again, we were talking to a guy previous on the show who helps angel investors set up SPVs so that cap tables stay clean, right? So in other words, you have 10 people that want to invest in company A, but having 10 people with different amounts on the cap table just looks really stupid to the next round of investors. So SPVs actually come in kind of handy there. I presume you're working on that at some level too. But before we get into like where artificial intelligence comes in and stuff like that, after this reset that you were talking about, how would you characterize the types of people? Because, you know, one of the things that happens in the United States is that you're right, founders pay it forward, but there haven't even been that many exits in Asia or in Southeast Asia in the last like 15 years or whatever. Let's just call it the last decade. So paying it forward is going to be hard for people that haven't been paid. And my experience has been, from an angel investor standpoint, that they want to make decisions on their own. So you can go to them, but they don't want to pay. They didn't want to pay us, at least, for advice. They were like, just give us the deal. If we want to make an investment, we'll do it. We'll pay you a small commission. And if we don't want to do it, I don't want to talk to you anymore kind of thing. How has the environment changed over time where doing this sort of angel investor consolidation is actually now more effective than it was, let's say, a decade ago?
Sure, happy to throw some light on this. I think if you define this archetype of this new age angel investor, right? So I think group one is still your ex-Lazada, ex-Shopee, ex-Grab. I mean, technology companies or consumer technology companies that made it big in the last decade. And, they were sometimes first 50 employees. Now they have a bit of liquidity as these companies went public and created wealth.
Sure, the Rocket guys.
Rocket plus, right? I mean, if you consider Grab, Carsom, C Group, it's a plus. So that's one bucket. I think the bucket two, which was very exciting for us to notice, is this generational wealth that got shifted from conglomerates or successful SME business owners, and their kids went out to go study in the US and UK, maybe dabbed at angel investing through crowdfunding platforms or platforms like AngelList, and came back and wanted to do the same. Because either they've experienced this or the excitement of this, and they came back and said, how do I get deal flow? How do I start investing?
Right.
So that's archetype two. And we get a bunch of these investors that we meet and we engage and we say, look, our job is similar to what you defined as. We'll find the best deals. We'll put it on the table. If you want to co-invest alongside us, go ahead and write a small check. If you don't want, just sit it out and wait till the right opportunity excites you, right? And the archetype three is more seasoned angels who are not in the Southeast Asia ecosystem. When I say that, if you look at India as a broader ecosystem, they probably have 17 to 20,000 on the best estimate active angels. And they've done enough India deals. They understand India enough. And now probably they're more sophisticated to see, okay, if Southeast Asia is the next emerging market, what are the bets I want to take in Southeast Asia based on lessons I've learned in India, or models that have worked in India may work in Southeast Asia. So we're seeing an influx of these angels as well, alongside, let's say, more mature markets like Middle East now and Europe.
So Jason Calacanis is probably one of the most famous angel investors in the world, invested in some really interesting companies, including Uber, which is the thing that made him super famous. Who knows how much money he invested in Uber, but it turned into like $100 million, and he wrote a book about it called Angel, How to Invest in Technology Startups. And one of the things that he did, and I spoke to him about this actually, because I was trying to help him set up his angel investor conference in Singapore. They decided to do it in Australia because the Australian government paid them to do it, to be fair. But he hasn't been back since. And I'm really struggling to understand, because we dealt with all the same cohorts that you were talking about. And I found the most interesting one, not the guys that actually were the first people hired at Lazada and even Grab, like Anthony Tan. Does he invest in startups? I don't know the answer to that question. But the second generational wealth people that you talked about, the kids of the founders or the grandkids of the founders of companies, whether they're in Thailand or in Vietnam or in Indonesia, again, were the most intransigent when it came to saying, I want to be part of a group. I'm just curious, again, how that's changed over the past 10 years, because what we saw was that those guys didn't want to be involved in part of, and I'm curious why, the angel investment platform worked in the US, but it doesn't or hasn't worked out here until now.
Okay, maybe I answer the second one first. In my opinion,
please,
a successful platform like AngelList only works if you have good syndicate leads or operators of these syndicates.
Yeah, exactly. So where do those syndicate leads come from here? Right, because you're talking about a whole generation of guys and gals that have never invested in startups, and they're not going to lead some. Like when Jason Calacanis or Chamath was on AngelList, this was a long time ago, people believed in them because they were like, oh, that's the dude that invested in Uber. I want to be part of his syndicate, because if he's investing in that automated coffee machine company, I want to invest in that thing too. But who does that out here?
Exactly. So there were none. 3 years ago when I started, I wanted to join such syndicates. And there's a few out of Singapore with experienced operators or folks from tech. But broadly, there were none, right? And I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted a good syndicate lead who I could join.
And who you could trust, right?
Yeah, and I could trust. And I've been angel investing, similar to maybe you, for the last 14 years. So I was part of multiple syndicates in AngelList. I was also part of Jason Calacanis's original The Syndicate. I mean, I still get deals from them.
Good for you. Hopefully, you made some money there.
I did make a few good investments through Com and through The Syndicate, but I wanted to replicate that model for myself as an angel and say, who do I follow and who do I trust? Is it an ex-Lazada guy? Is it an ex-Rocket Internet guy? Is it an ex-Shopee or Grab guy that I think has that operator lens and can identify the best deals? And there were none. And hence, I don't know. I don't want to say I took it upon myself, but that's the gap I saw. And I said, okay, why don't I be that guy? I've been an operator, builder, angel investor for 14 years, and I'll just run my own syndicate. Yes, the infrastructure is needed, which is the second complexity in the US. It's easier to get one regulatory approval and run angel list across all the states.
Sure.
In Southeast Asia, you got to go to Singapore, and Thailand or Vietnam treats it as crowdfunding, but it's not really crowdfunding. Right. So there's lack of this infrastructure and regulatory framework that I can apply to say, if I'm an angel syndicate doing SPVs, investing and getting this collective of people to be on a cap table, how can I do this in the most compliant way? And there's no one rule, right? So the way we do it is the guy you had earlier on your show with Auptimate and using them as our partner in infrastructure, right?
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So you know those guys. You know Oliver.
Yeah, very well, very well. We I think both us as A2D and them started about the same time, the same year. We sort of worked and solved some of these complexities as we grow, right?
So can we talk about the flip side of this?
Sure.
Where does great deal flow come from? In other words, if you're angel investing, are you only focused on Southeast Asia? You told me that you have stuff like people who are angels all the way from Korea, to Japan and across the world. But are you selling them this idea of like you should be investing in startups in Southeast Asia? That's where you should do your angel investing, or is it anywhere in the world, or is it a combination of both? And if so, where do you get the deal flow from, particularly if it's in Southeast Asia?
So today, I mean, you as a syndicate, you kind of want to be known for something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're known for either a
what does Ankit know better than everybody else, kind of thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Or access to founders. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. So today, what we're focused mostly on is Southeast Asian founders or Southeast Asian startups. Now, a founder could be based in the US. I mean, we have one in our portfolio called LineWise. A couple of Thai founders who went to MIT, then went to Y Combinator last summer. They've just raised 2 rounds of funding since then. But
LineWise.
It's called LineWise, and again, going into AI, they do AI for manufacturing, and we can talk about that more later. But so ideally, if a founder is either operating out of the US or Europe, but has a Southeast Asia angle,
right.
Customers, operation base, or Southeast Asia origin, I think that's broadly our mandate. So either the startup working in and operating in Southeast Asia or operating globally with a Southeast Asia angle. And again, why we did that was for mainly 2 reasons. One is my belief that the outcomes in Southeast Asia will look very different. They're not going to look like the US or India.
Right.
It's a market that's been overlooked from both a early stage capital perspective as well as the new inflection point of talent I see coming into Southeast Asia now. Yep. And I think that deserves more attention. And B, it's still a maturing ecosystem. So over time, if you take these bets and you have patient capital to back it, I think Southeast Asia does have the right recipe to create these outcomes maybe in the next decade or so, right?
So where are the best startups being created? What verticals are they operating in? Is it all AI stuff? And like, how come I haven't heard of them? Like, why am I so out of the loop where I have the biggest tech podcast in Asia and I feel like I'm completely out of the loop when it comes to startups? And I was deeply involved. You probably know this, but I was a limited partner in Ardent Capital. So I kind of was really well connected, not just in Thailand, but in the rest of Southeast Asia, across Singapore. I talked to the JFDI. Like, I've known everybody since the beginning, and now I feel like there's nothing going on. So what am I missing? What are the best startups, and where are they being created, and who's creating them?
I think over the last 2 years, okay, maybe my answer is different last year than the year before, but I think from a category lens, I see these startups being built in broadly 3 buckets, right?
Go ahead.
Consumer. I think consumer still makes sense. They're in alternative beverages space. They're in F&B, consumer-facing products in general. I think founders understand their market better and know what works. And rightfully so. If you look around and you see a bunch of these successful high growth SMEs or companies that become conglomerates did come from those consumer heavy sectors, right? So that's an aspiration setting for these founders, and they're saying, okay, can I become the next Mama Noodle of Thailand? Can I become the next Nissan Foods? And let me go attack that category.
Got it.
That's bucket one. Bucket two, I'm starting to see more deep tech. When I say deep tech, is a combination of used to be ML, AI, robotics, or biotech, and we have two in our portfolio in the biotech space, medtech, health tech. I'm seeing a lot more founders build in that space. Again, you take combinations of either the aging population that can afford to pay for premium services, or you take the masses that are not served, and how can I use technology now to bring down the cost and serve those?
Got it.
And bucket three is obviously now AI, but it's more vertical AI or applied AI, which I think makes more sense in Southeast Asia context versus saying I'm going to build the next big LLM out of Thailand. I don't think that's happening.
That's not going to happen. Okay, look, I feel like our 20 minutes has gone by really, really fast. There's probably more to do, but I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming and doing this. And look, as new stuff happens, I'd be curious to understand, because look, one of the things that I wanted to know was what sort of tech startups, and I feel like the startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia has changed in the past, I'm just going to say 10 years, right? Because before it was a bunch of sort of aspirational tech companies that looked like companies in the United States, not so much in Europe. And now I feel like it's more just like, yeah, we're not going to do that because we have no competitive advantage, but we could be the next Mama Noodle, which there's definitely, because no one from the US is going to come and do that. No one's going to bring their company in from the United States and do that here. That's a different type of startup, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a very different lens. And just to add more 30 seconds on this, I think you were saying last 10 years, I'm saying in the last 3 years, I've seen a massive shift in the way founders are approaching it.
Yeah.
I'll give you 3 examples. We invested in Roller Robotics that's building autonomous kitchens out of Singapore.
Got it.
It's similar to Top-In or Flying Turtle, but how can you apply that same robotics tech to food, which I think is a need for markets that have high labor costs. Again, solving a real Southeast Asia problem. Then we have another portfolio company that's building seaplanes. If seaplanes can operate in all parts of the world, why cannot they successfully operate in Southeast Asia?
What's the name of the seaplane company?
It's called Seaplane Asia, and they have 2 entities. One is
I know those guys. Okay.
Seaplane and Santai Seaplane.
I know those guys. Okay. Good idea.
The third company we invested in is called Aya. So these are functional everyday beverages for the health conscious, right?
I got it.
Again, this is an example where you take local ingredients, you produce a product that's made in Thailand, has a global longevity wellness appeal, and hence you're able to scale and ride that sort of consumer trend, right?
Got it. Okay, I'm going to let you go. We should figure out a way to have a coffee together so I can ask you more questions. Ankit, it was great to have you here. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
My pleasure. Okay, Martin, let's bring Isabella in. Isabella, how are you? Can you hear me okay? I am doing super duper. You look very what's the right word? Audibly prepared for this. Let's hope so. I'm sure, well, at least the headphones look great. Okay, look, we wanted to have you here because we wanted to talk about how open energy modeling software helps governments and investors make faster, more transparent, clean energy decisions. And before we get to that in detail, maybe you can tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about TransitionZero so they have some context, yeah?
Yeah, that would be my pleasure. So TransitionZero is a climate tech not-for-profit sitting at the intersection of energy planning software and AI, and it's based out of the UK. And our mission, as you just said, is to build software that reduces the time to build clean energy at scale. And the way that we do this is through our flagship product that we call Scenario Builder, and that'll sort of basically be talking around for the next 20 minutes. But Scenario Builder is a no-code energy systems modeling platform that allows governments, researchers, investors to run the kind of scenario analysis that determines what gets built on the grid, where, and when. So Southeast Asia, which is the region that I sit in, is one of the most consequential places for that type of energy transition work right now because
Because
power demand is growing very fast, industrialization, urbanization, data centers, and ASEAN governments have made significant commitments around clean energy infrastructure. And so the decisions that are being made today about what gets built will basically lock in outcomes, the prices that we pay for power over the next 30 years. And so whether those decisions are grounded in open and transparent analysis or just whatever the best funded party can afford to model matters enormously. And that's the gap that TransitionZero currently sits in.
So why does it feel like climate tech is so much more relevant and important in Southeast Asia today? First of all, than it ever has been. But second of all, I feel like the interest in the space has dropped off dramatically in Europe and in the United States. We don't have to talk about the US because it's in its own little weird bubble right now. But why has it become so important in Southeast Asia?
I think what you're seeing is sort of this natural trend in progress where it often starts in these centers of like Europe and the United States and then ramps up in Asia, and it in some ways gets hyperscaled in places like Asia, and that's exactly what you're seeing now.
Yeah.
I think for Southeast Asia, there's just so much policy change and investment that is coming into the region, both internationally and domestically driven, that I think it's only natural that people are trying to build up their understanding of tech, trying to push domestic tech development. And so I think it's a really interesting intersection because tech needs to be powered by electricity. And we are also facing really detailed, important questions around where that electricity is sourced.
Yeah, super important. And particularly for a place like Singapore where there's no, there's no natural gas, there's no oil. Everything has to be imported. But I also feel like Singapore is the epicenter of where this sort of climate tech is being developed and sort of fanned out to the rest of the region. How important is Singapore as the basis for this understanding about climate tech and its ability to then, like I said, get pushed into the rest of Southeast Asia?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think that
I try.
Yeah, I think that Singapore is, like you said, kind of the epicenter for a lot of these things, and partly because there is such a pre-existing environment for techs. All of the Googles and the Microsofts have major offices there. And another reason is, as you said, like Singapore is an island and it doesn't have too many of its own domestic resources. So when we talk about electricity, it's driving a lot of the conversation because it's trying to import power from its neighboring countries. It's trying as much as possible to import clean power. And that is a really ongoing and live and quite energetic discussion about how those countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam are creating are building enough clean power to supply not just their domestic source, but also to export that into Singapore. The other part of it is that the export policy or the arrangements around export and trade of power are suddenly coming to the forefront. So we have a concept called the ASEAN Power Grid that has been stalled for the last 20 years, but under Singapore's initiative and leadership has become central to a lot of the regional discussion. At TransitionZero over the last 2 weeks, we've released 2 products in very quick succession that we're hoping aid a lot of these discussions. So the first is AMP V2, which is an AI agent powering the tool that I mentioned. And the second is ASEAN Power Grid modeling, which means that users can now model multinational research questions. And the way that this has worked in the past is that you have individual countries coming with their national development plans, and that's hugely important. You have to supply power to yourselves first. But there has never been this basis for discussion around how power trading is going to work. And now we are at that stage. There are so many projects, there are so many players, and there's so many policy questions.
High quality
and we're
problem
hoping,
for you guys.
And so we're hoping that people can solve that on our platform.
What is the implication of companies like Google, who you said their headquarters in Southeast Asia, obviously based in Singapore, and Microsoft, making decisions in the last, I can't remember what it is now, but probably in the last 3 months, because we've done stories and segments on this for ATP. About how they want to build AI knowledge centers, but also AI data centers across the region So from a work perspective, obviously a lot of work for your teams at TransitionZero, but what are the implications for the energy grid, and how important is the modeling work that TransitionZero is doing in relation to the stuff that both Google and Microsoft are trying to affect in this region?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the question in everyone's mind. So these types of investments or data center investments are huge. They're going to require a lot of power.
Well, billions of dollars, and
Billions,
yeah.
gigawatt scale. And really
Yep.
at its core,
Yep.
like energy planning is about answering a deceptively simple question, which is how do we make sure there's enough power at a price people can afford? And for the Googles and Microsoft at a price that they're willing to invest a premium in. And how do we get there without locking ourselves into the wrong investment? The hard part is that the answer really depends on dozens of variables that are all uncertain and that all interact with each other. How fast will actual data center demand grow? Which is not just up to Google, right? It's up to the policy, the actual flow of money, like supply chains. How cheaply will this power be available? What happens to gas prices? Where should the transmission line go? And more critically, what do you build first? Where do you build it? Given that each decision shapes what makes sense to build next. And the reason it's hard is that the variables interact in quite non-obvious ways sometimes. Like a decision to build a data center in this part of the region and not in this part of the region affects like the flow of power. And you can't reason all of these things around a spreadsheet. And so that's where we see our role, providing specialist software that can hold the system in view at once and work out what the cheapest way to meet power looks like, given these sets of rules and assumptions. Google, Microsoft will have their own set of priorities versus government versus a developer. But we need to give people the tools and the ability to talk about it at a level playing field. And that's where we see our role.
So tell me if I have this right. How can we create enough power that people can afford?
Yes.
There's been a lot of backlash in the United States, in particular, and I was listening to somebody talk about this morning, and I've read about it as well. I don't know if it's in Texas or in Wyoming. I can't remember where it is, but like someone's trying to build an AI-enabled data center that's the size of 50 Walmarts, right? So it takes up like the same amount of energy as 3 counties, I believe, in Texas. I can't remember what it is, but it's just insane, right? As part of Scenario Builder and the services that TransitionZero is providing, right? Because you're agnostic about like, do you know what I mean? Like you're just trying to help people figure out, again, how to have the right amount of power at the right price so people can afford it. But is there sort of this movement towards, if you're building your own data center that's the size of 50 Walmarts, and to be fair, if it's only the size of 10 Walmarts or whatever it is, but you're putting that in Thailand or Malaysia or in Singapore, you probably can't build something that big because there's just not enough land. But in Vietnam, is there a move towards private energy creation so that it doesn't impact the existing grid? Because the existing grid was really made for like, I mean, let's be fair, office buildings, trains.
Yeah.
It wasn't even made to like service EV vehicles, which puts a little bit of a tax on the electricity grid. Homes and office buildings. It wasn't meant to serve like massive data centers. I don't even want to talk about the water that has to go through this stuff to cool it, because that's outside of your bailiwick. But how, like, is there a move towards even using the Scenario Builder tools to say, one of the things we recommend is, why don't just build your own small nuclear power plant near your data center, so that then you could just use that power with no impact on the grid at all. And if there's excess energy there, you can actually sell it back to the grid. So it makes it more efficient and less expensive for people to get energy.
Yeah. Yes, so we did that type of modeling for 5 countries in Asia last year: Japan, India,
Japan as well.
Singapore, Malaysia, and Taiwan. I think there are 2 parts of that question. So there's the assumption around data center growth that is massive, like 5 Walmarts, as you said. That is assumption that we need to watch very carefully and that we need to test for. It is, absolutely. And I think that something that folks are quite keenly aware of, that you don't want to overbuild the system. The other tension there is like, you do want this type of growth to be coming in, but you also need to protect your consumer. So it's exactly right that there are a lot of policies that have been released in like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, who want to bring this type of investment that would allow developers to invest in their own power. and give them the ability to meet stable load, but also in the future, hopefully sell it back to the grid. So that type of movement does exist. There are a lot of conversations around it. There's policy being designed from it. I think it's just really important to think about whether you can actually island those. And there is this fundamental tension in like the resources that are available to us, right? Like if we are only trying to meet this type of demand, what happens to the rest of consumer? And so that's sort of what we're trying to plan around.
Right. So in my mind, I'm just asking this question to myself. It's like, what's worse? I wrote this down, right? What's worse? Having too much power generation, meaning there's excess power generation out there. So like, let's say, company, I don't want to, it doesn't matter to me if it's Google or Microsoft or Alibaba, it doesn't matter to me, right? I don't really care. Let's say some big company wants to build a big data center in Vietnam and they build their own power gen station, whatever that means. And then they don't build that data center, but the power's there. Who's going to complain about like, oh, now we have this power thing we can buy. We can plug that into the grid, which takes about 2 years to do. And now everybody's energy is cheaper. The government buys it. They didn't have to invest in it. Like that's way better than building the data center, not having enough energy, blowing up the energy costs in like whatever the locality is. And then going, uh-oh, now we have to build some more energy. Because to me, the fundamental choice here is like those big companies that are profit oriented are not going to then go out and build their own power because they're just like, we don't care kind of thing.
Yeah.
So where does TransitionZero fit into that conversation where it's like, do you know what I mean? Because you can never have like, we used to say you can never be too rich, too thin, or have too much money. That wasn't the last one, but the last one I'm not saying out loud, but you can never be too rich, too thin, or have too much energy as well. I think would be an appropriate thing to say.
I think this is where the other part of the pie becomes really important because you can have too much energy. And we've seen this.
But why?
You can build too much power. And the result of that is that you've created an investment that you're not able to use. And so it becomes a sunk cost. And we've seen the result of this in the past, actually, because a lot of countries, particularly in Asia, have overestimated the amount of demand growth that they were going to have over like decades. And the result of that, we're still paying for today in countries like Indonesia, where
Too much
the
power.
GDP, too much power. And so they've locked themselves into coal power at a fairly in a fairly concentrated part of the grid. And the result of that is that the rest of your system has to pay for it. And we can also see this in other types of developments. Like if you're looking at building an offshore wind farm or a solar farm, the last thing that you want is a thing that's called curtailment, which means you're producing power that's not being used, because then you're producing an asset that just goes nowhere and you've paid money to be able to generate that. So these demand assumptions, hugely important. We have to be able to talk about it really realistically.
Yeah, the future is really hard to predict. I'd rather have more of something than less of something, but maybe that's just me. Are you seeing in individual countries a bias towards a certain type of energy? So the reason why I asked that question is solar energy is really popular in Thailand. There's some big solar energy providers here. Solar is also big in Japan, but nuclear energy is everywhere in Japan. I don't know if there's nuclear energy in Thailand, but I see very little of it in Vietnam and Indonesia. Do you know what I mean? So are there biases around? Like I'm surprised that Indonesia did coal, but maybe I shouldn't be so surprised. But then how do you get past those biases so that they can have a better balance, right? So they're not so wed to like one type of power, which over time, like, you know what I mean? Like after the 2011 earthquake in Japan, like nuclear power, they just like turned it off. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah, you're absolutely right.
Years later, it's like nuclear power is super safe, super clean, whatever. It just takes time to build. So I'm just curious how you get past those biases as well in Scenario Builder and in the way you advise people to build energy stuff.
Yeah, so in Scenario Builder, we have a number of countries represented, and the assumptions that underpin it is you're solving for or you're providing power based on what's available in that country, which is usually and historically how people have built power. So like Indonesia has quite a bit of coal because they have a lot of domestic coal. So the fuel is cheap for them. I think though, as we're moving towards the future and we have these new types of technologies like solar, wind, batteries, and we're getting quite good at being able to balance variability, diversification becomes really key in an energy mix, the ability to be flexible about what's being deployed. That's an ongoing conversation. But yes, there's an optimization that happens based on what's available to you at what price, where your demand is currently at. And so the tool is trying to solve for all of those things.
How does this play into how much money and how many resources actually get invested into energy production and energy creation in the region?
It really depends on the country. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
But are there some countries that are super interested in understanding like what their power grids look like and what they should look like? I'm just going to pick a number 6 years out, and some other countries that are just like, we'll figure it out at some point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't want to know who they are because I don't want to disparage anybody, but
yeah, I think every country is currently interested in solving for not just 6 years into the future, but 30 years into the future, because it means that these are the types of investment they're bringing into their country today.
Right. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
So what kinds of decisions get made that are bad for energy? Do you know what I mean? Besides the overbuilding, I cannot believe that there's overbuilding. Can I give you an example?
Sure.
In the late 90s, before you were born, and the early 2000s, I'm kidding, but in the early 2000s, late 90s, like people expected internet usage to increase dramatically, and a bunch of phone companies sprung up. This is like probably in the early 90s as well, and they built fiber everywhere. And then for like 6 or 7 years, that fiber was just like useless because nobody was using it, but it was still there. And over time, all of that fiber capacity has now been used and overused, right? Because to go from, I don't know, like, 10 megabits up and down to everybody's house to gigabit Ethernet in the United States or anywhere in the world, you need more fiber. So one of the things that I feel like I've learned a little bit is that, sure, you can overbuild today, and the companies that overbuild, they'll lose money, but that means people can acquire those resources at a much cheaper rate. And frankly, if somebody builds a nuclear power plant that they're not using, there's definitely somebody out there that would buy it, I think, even if it's 3 years from now, no?
Yeah, I think energy gets compared with telecom quite often.
Sorry.
But I think it makes sense.
Mind.
It is, we try and understand based on what's more accessible to us, right? And I think what's changed over the last few years versus from telecom to energy, because I think they're quite similar in the past, is that you have so many more players and so many more options in the energy sector right now.
Yeah, fair enough.
But the way that it's governed, I think for telecom is it's still quite centralized. For energy, there's, I think, I don't want the telecom people to come after me, but there are a number of more factors that you're solving for. There are more developers, there are more technologies. You can definitely have a bad investment in energy. You can locate it at the wrong place. You can have priced the power at a too high a rate. You can have connected it to the wrong substation, build it at the wrong time, all of these things. And it's hugely capital intensive.
Well, it's very capital intensive. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier. It normally takes like somewhere between 18 months and 2 years just to connect to the grid. Even after you've built it, it probably takes like, well, depending on what you're building, it could take years to build a power source, right? So yeah.
I think that's probably another reason. And because it's so capital intensive, the turnover, like buying a nuclear plant that's already standing, there's just way more factors you have to consider.
Fair enough. I try to simplify things, one, because I'm not that smart, but two, because I want the audience to get a better understanding of, just this. If I can simplify the thought around it, then people, I think, can think more deeply about it in a way that maybe they couldn't have understood otherwise. Anyway, Isabella, thank you so much for doing this. Very, very informative. And thank you for indulging me and letting me ask like a bunch of different questions. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this was as fun for you as it was for me.
Oh, absolutely. Most fun I've had all day.
Thanks. It was nice to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, Martin, let's bring in Mohammed as well. Mohammed, can you hear me? Am I echoing? Okay, but you can hear me okay, yeah? Okay. Look, thank you very much for thank you very much for joining the show. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. We wanted to have you on because, and this should be a really interesting conversation. We want to understand how AI, artificial intelligence, automation can or will reshape finance operations and the role of finance teams. Maybe before we get to that in detail, you can tell us about, how do I pronounce this? Plouton AI?
Yeah, Plouton AI. Plouton AI.
Got it. Plouton AI. Okay, go for it. So tell me a little bit more about that, and then we'll jump into some deeper topics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me. Just a brief background. So I basically come from a core technology background, but my first job happened to be at Deloitte, and that is where my love towards the field of finance grew from the perspective of computer science and AI.
Yep.
And when I started my career with Deloitte, there was a saying that redundancy in enterprise finance is a workflow problem and not a tooling one. Which means that the tools that are designed for finance are much more capable of the task they are designed to do. Is the communication layer between the finance, which enforces enterprise finance team to move manually, because there is a very low and zero level of API integration set up for the tools that they already use. So that is where basically the redundancy comes in, and thousands of hours are being spent on manual workflows. So luckily, there is a new concept in AI which we call as browser use agents or the computer use agents, which basically agents acts and mimics just like human and like junior finance associate. So they can basically navigate screens just like human and can complete 10 days worth of tasks in a single hour. So that is what Plouton AI also does, and that is where the biggest opportunity lies in the field of finance, especially from the perspective of AI automation.
Okay, let's see where the rubber hits the road here. In the real world, how are finance teams actually using this type of agentic AI today? And that's the first thing. So like, give me a couple of scenarios where they're actually using it. And the second thing is, because I think they're related, is how ready are most companies that have decent finance operations, right, are actually set up in a way that makes it possible for them to implement agentic AI in a way that's actually going to add to efficiency and not just add to more work for the people that are already there?
So I'll go with the second question first. So just to give you context, so we have a larger number of mid-market enterprises. When I say mid-market enterprises, I mean workforces having 100 plus employees and can go up to thousands. So that is the target audience, which is basically wants to use AI, but they can't use AI because the costs and complexities that are involved.
Right. So and how big are those finance teams in a company that's like 100 to 1,000 people?
So so typically it ranges from 10 to 12 people and can go up to 40 people. What we have noticed and seen, not just across the APAC region but across the globe. So that is the typical size of the enterprise finance teams. And the problem is currently what they do is, because they're using multiple tools like Zero, NetSuite, which are general most common finance tools. But the problem is that they are navigating between 6 to 8 different tool stack between their finance operations, which might include the Zeros, NetSuite, but also their internal ERPs, their attendance systems, their other ERP portals, web logins, government portals. And the problem with these portals and with these tools is that they don't support the integration layer that is needed, which usually large enterprises have through Oracles and SAPs of the world, or through RPA solutions like UiPath, which banks typically uses. So the problem comes in: A, they don't have the API infrastructure; B, they can't have the cost and the complexity. They can't afford the cost and complexities of these legacy RPA tools. So that is where basically the problem comes in. They either outsource this to back office services firm, or they usually have more resources just to make their work faster. So that is the current landscape. So they're not technically using any agentic AI when we say mid-market enterprises. So they want to use it, but they can't use it because of the limitations.
So how do you fix that? So where are these finance teams actually using the artificial intelligence today?
So we came in with this concept of computer use agent and browser use agent, which means you don't really need any integration. You don't really need to make any changes to your finance tool set. So whatever the way the finance is being operated, it will still operate the same way. Our agent basically comes in just like you are hiring a virtual employee. You create your credentials, you teach, you onboard the agent just like you onboard an employee, and the agent will do all the work, but at a 10x faster speed and a 10x more accurate stuff. The challenge that we still get from these finance teams is...
Can we slow down for a second? So 10x more accurate, 10x more stuff. So who inside the company is responsible for training the agent to do that stuff with an understand? Because two things can be true at the same time, right? The first is the agent can be super useful, but the second thing is that the existing workflow doesn't optimize for the way that the agent can work. So a bunch of things have to change. The first is somebody, as you said, has to teach the agent the same way they would teach a new employee. But because the agent can work in a way that a new human employee can't work, someone potentially has to also understand what the new workflow is as well. So how do they balance those two things? Because to make the agent 10 times more productive, he's not, I'm saying he, but you understand, that agent then can't just do the work in the same way that a human does it, because that's not going to make them 10 times more productive. Right, because then it's dependent upon humans feeding it other information that go into that system that they're using into the ERP system and stuff like that. So, like, how do all those things balance out?
So just to give you a context, so the best and the worst thing about finance is that it is deterministic. When I say deterministic, it means
No, I get it.
that finance follows certain sequence of steps. So it doesn't change from like decades have been following the same steps.
No. 6 times 7 is always 42. It's always 42. It's very deterministic. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the workflows are very deterministic. So that means we have a sequence of steps that needs to be followed. It's just that, for example, if a person would do a certain task like in 10 hours, an agent would do it like in certain minutes. So that is where the efficiency comes in. And then you talked about the accuracy, how the accuracy is improved. Because it is deterministic, the AI, the agent is very good in navigation, but when it comes to the finance workflows, it has to follow certain rules and steps. So the answer is basically deterministic. So the accuracy is always there. So in terms of human error, basically you get diminished the human error, you increase the speed, but you also increase the accuracy because you are following certain rule set and not involving any creativity like we involve in essay writing or any other general task where AI is being involved. So in finance, it is mostly deterministic.
So are you using any big models to do this, or you're just using workflow? Do you know what I mean? Like defined deterministic workflows to be able to do this, where LLMs, which are probabilistic by nature, are not involved in this process. So where does the agentic AI come in, and how does it get its information, and what is it running on?
So there are 3 layers to our platform. The first layer is basically the agentic AI, which is basically capable of navigating the desktop applications or the browser applications of the tabs, where it's basically extracting the information and the data. The second layer is most of a rule-based deterministic layer, which is less agentic AI and depends on the finance workflows, which has always been there, which is our proprietary layer. And the third is the communication layer, in which it involves the human in the loop or the supervisor, where it gets stuck and needs some feedback. So that layer is also agentic AI. So it's a combination of LLM, where we are using different models like Quen, but at the same time, the central layer is the logic-based layer, where there is less AI work, but more of a deterministic work.
Right. So are you finding that when you go into these enterprises that certain things have to be true or fixed before they can actually implement this agentic AI in the finance space? And if that's true, are there places where this just won't work? Like, are there parts of the finance workflow where it's just like, you know what, this is just going to be too hard?
So one thing that we keep getting feedback is basically the enterprise finance teams have a trust deficit for such adoption, and
For sure.
it is, I think it must be true, because finance includes sensitive data, and at enterprise level you cannot compromise on certain compliances, whether they are global level compliances or your country level compliances. So that trust deficit needs to be reduced before we even plug in and use our platform. So that's why trust security is of paramount importance for us. So we are SOC 2 compliant from day one, and that is the reason we want to make sure that we have enterprise grade security and auditability for these enterprises, to make sure that they are not just trusting us, but also have certain fallback strategies if AI goes some other way. So you have to be secured in your finance department specifically.
Do you run into situations where some of these enterprises have like Plouton AI come in and you're like, you explain what you do and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, that means we have to like increase our security? Do you know what I mean? Where like the security hasn't been good enough, but they've kind of been just like winging it for a while, hoping nobody would attack them, and now they have to then go out and do something else first, or a couple of something else first before they can implement this stuff?
So yeah, absolutely. So they will not talk to you if you are not SOC 2 compliant, if you're not GDPR compliant, if you don't have some certain
Yeah, but what
ISO
if
certification.
they're not SOC 2 compliant though? They're not GDPR compliant already. Do you know what I mean? But they need to be able
Yeah,
to do this stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I understand that, and there were cases, but mostly these are very small enterprises. When we talk about mid-market enterprises, the 99% of the cases we have seen that they are already compliant because they won't be able to operate in certain regulations if they are not compliant themselves. But like there is a fraction of cases where they are not compliant, and we help them basically referring them to third-party partners where they can get compliant as quickly as possible.
What kind of risks get introduced that may not have been anticipated by the enterprise? I'm sure you guys understand this, but what kind of risks get introduced that they may not have anticipated when they start deploying artificial intelligence in this way?
I think this is the first and the foremost examples we have been observing that as well in general. When you implement probabilistic models specifically and not deterministic models, there have been cases where AI has done certain actions which cause some problems inside the enterprises as well. So we always say there should always be human in the loop, whether you are using AI or not AI. And second thing, we personally believe that deterministic workflows is the way, because that is where we can have control, but can also have automation as well. Because in probabilistic models, there will be a time where AI will become much more smarter and can start performing actions which you can't control, and nobody has the control over it when the action is being performed.
Yeah. How do finance teams change? Like the more they implement artificial intelligence, the more you say, like if stuff gets 10 times more efficient, what happens to the finance teams, like as more of that work gets automated?
So one thing that because our metrics are usually whenever we plug in into enterprise, there are two KPIs that being set by the enterprises. The first one is the time saved, and second is cost saved, because they are already leveraging a lot of other tools and also a lot of other back office services farms and a lot of other third party resources to solve their bottlenecks. So they count us on how much we reduce in terms of their expenditure, but also in terms of time. So in time, we reduce like up to 85%, 90% of their time through our automation, but also we have seen like up to 80% of cost being reduced, which was being sent to solve these bottlenecks. So they can spend more time on analytics. They can spend more time on strategizing next plans within their enterprises, and can also use that unused budget in other areas of their enterprises.
Is there a way to over automate this stuff? And I'll tell you what I mean. Again, if your finance team has 12 people in it and you're getting 10 times more productive because you're employing AI agents to do some of the work or to automate some of these tasks for you, at some point you have fewer humans than just looking at how finance itself is actually progressing. And I'm wondering if you lose a little bit of this analysis around like, hey, maybe we should change this flow, or maybe this customer we could do more work with this customer. You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes like a finance guy or gal, they have so much experience that when they look at what's going on inside the finance department, they can actually say things to the sales team or to the go-to-market team that they might not have noticed, that those teams might not have noticed on their own. Are the agents themselves empowered to do that stuff as well, where they see like certain trends, and then they can then they're empowered to like write emails, let's say, to the sales team and say, hey, look, I've noticed this thing, I've noticed that thing, this thing's cyclical, all that kind of stuff, where the finance team might have done that or a finance human might have done that in the past?
Absolutely. One of the use cases that we do is reconciliation. So one of the enterprise that we were working on, the finance team needs to do a lot of follow-ups with the sales team, because once the remuneration is done, then only the reconciliation can be done on the finance side. So we have seen some patterns that the AI recognized, because it was doing follow-ups over email, and within a couple of months, it recognized certain patterns where it basically said or suggested the sales team that you do it like this or you do it like this. It increases the overall efficiency of the organization, because it also helps in closing the cycle much faster than we are right now doing it, even with AI or without AI.
Got it. Are you seeing implementations be different in different countries? or is it pretty much the same across the board?
So absolutely, there is a difference because North American markets, we have seen that is a lot of competition in terms of the offerings, but also the adaptability. The adaptability is much faster compared to the APAC and the Gulf region. The Gulf region, we are seeing a lot of automation, but on the regulation side, like there are a lot of new policies are being introduced, like tax and VAT compliances, which weren't there like before. So there are a lot of automations on that side. But on the APAC region, we see a slight increase in the adaptation because a couple of years ago, organizations weren't looking forward to it. They were like, we would do internal innovations, we'll see. But now we have seen a trend where they are seeing how we can improve and make our processes much more efficient compared to where we were standing last year.
Got it. Okay. What are some things that we should be looking out for over the next like 3 to 6 years that we haven't considered yet in the automation using artificial intelligence for finance teams?
I think you just mentioned that a lot of us are leveraging a lot of models for the LLM part. So the cost of tokens right now, what we see is getting cheaper and cheaper. But at the same time, after 3 to 6 years, when there is abundant usage, we see that this cost will also be increasing after 3 to 6 years. So that is going to be a time where you basically have to make sure that these agentic platforms give the promised ROI that they are promising to these enterprises. Because if it costs the same, if I would be hiring a human person, then I would have never done it in the first place. So that is something that we have to watch as general audience, because these giants have to decide where this direction goes. But this is one of the important decisions that everyone is right now watching in the industry, especially in the next 3 to 5 years.
I want to get this right. Jevon's paradox says that the cheaper something becomes, the more people use it. So even if you're suggesting that the cost of any individual token is going down, I would make the case that I don't think the token costs. I've been saying this now for a while. That people are just going to use it more, so that the cost itself is actually overall is not going to come down. How do you square those two things?
Yes, I think right now, in terms of the capacity, every big like FAANG company is deploying their own infrastructure, and the reason for it is because they've already forecasted that the cost will eventually increase, and otherwise they would have like outsourced that. Yeah, would increase in the longer run. In the shorter run, it would decrease because right now there is enough appetite. But as we see more and more adoption from enterprise, from B2B side, but also from the general audience as well, in terms of AI adoption, eventually it will increase, and that is the reason, because that is how we see it. Because all the big companies like Google, Facebook, they are deploying their own infrastructure, and the only reason they are deploying their own infrastructure is because they can see the cost being increased in the longer run, so that they can depend on their own infrastructure rather than giving it to someone else.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Like, if you're not building your own data centers and you're providing AI, like Frontier Lab AI services to people, you're going to be in deep trouble, because the cost of compute is not going to go down that much. And building compute takes years, and then connecting that compute to the grid takes more years. It's going to be a nightmare. Okay, Mohammed, thank you so much for coming and doing this today. I really appreciate your time. Super interesting stuff. Thank you again for coming and doing this with us today. Okay, everybody, that is it. Another amazing episode, actually. Thank you, everybody, for coming to watch and to participate in ATP Insights. I really appreciate everybody joining us today live, and everybody who watches this after the live is published. Give us a thumbs up on the video. I cannot tell you how much it helps us, and it just makes us happy. You want to make us happy, right? Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Follow us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. And let us know in the comments if there's anything you would like us to discuss, or if there are any guests you think we should have on the show that we're missing. And if you have any questions, we love to answer our audience's questions. We feel like we have a lot of insights because we've spoken to so many people over the past bunch of years, particularly in the tech space. We've spent a lot of time in the last year talking about artificial intelligence. We'd love to answer some questions there. None of this production is possible without my partner, Martin Runford. My name is Michael Waits. Bye for now.